Sorry.
That's the Palestinian.
Councillors, ladies and gentlemen, please be upstanding for the Mayor of the City of Clarence, Councillor Brendan Moore.
Well, hello, welcome all. Before proceeding, I pay my respects to the Mummerimina people as the traditional and original custodians of the lands on which we meet, and I acknowledge the continuing connection of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to the skies, land and waterways. I pay respect to elders past and present. Before we commence with tonight's meeting, please let us all pause for a quiet moment of reflection and respect. Thank you, councillors. Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. Well, good evening and welcome to the Clarence City Council meeting of Monday, the 17th of June 2024. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube, and what is said in this meeting is not protected by privilege, and there is a link to the agenda papers on Council's website. Item 2, apologies. Councillor Beth Warren has a leave of absence, and Councillor Jade Darko is an apology this evening. Item number 3, declarations of interest of councillors or close associates. Are there any declarations from councillors? Colleagues, we were all saddened to learn of the passing last Wednesday of legendary Tasmanian surfing identity, Mr Michael Lawrence. To move a condolence motion in honour of Mick, I call on his good friend of many years, indeed a lifelong friend, Councillor Kennedy.
Thank you, Mayor. And yes, last week the world unexpectedly lost an incredible man, Mick Lawrence. Mick lived most of his life in the city of Clarence at his beloved Clifton Beach home. The tributes continue to flow from around the globe for Mick. He was an internationally acclaimed filmmaker and significant author, an adventurer, an environmentalist, a mentor, a father and grandfather figure to many. In Tasmania, he's probably best known as our surfing pioneer. His critically acclaimed documentary Rogue Wave premiered at the State Cinema in 2022 following the tragic passing of his only son, Tim. In recent years, he took over the presidency of Surfing Tasmania, volunteering thousands of hours, helping the young and those particularly that needed a helping hand in finding their way in life, welcoming them into this kind and caring community. I'd like to pass on deepest sympathy to Mick's wife, Robin, family and his many, many friends. His loss is enormous. Thank you.
Councillor Kennedy, thank you. Colleagues, we'll be upstanding for a moment of respect, please. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillors, before we move into the omnibus items, I'd just like to say that tonight is one of those nights where we will truly shape the future of our city. We have a very full agenda dealing with some big issues for Clarence. Tonight, among other items, we will be considering Council's budget for 2024-2025, an expansion of the Derwent Ferry service, our customer service charter, our annual plan, 2 motions relating to the High Performance Centre, and a petition to hold an elector poll. Tonight is an important night, and in all likelihood we will be here well into the evening. I ask that we please respect each other and the directions from the Chair, and as always, bring our best selves to the service of our community. Now, into our omnibus items. Item number 4, 4.1, confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the council meeting held on the 27th of May 2024 have been circulated. Are there any issues arising? There being none, we move now to 4.2, Mayor's Communications, and 4.2.1, my diary entries have been circulated, and that's from the 28th of May through to today, the 17th of June, as well as Councillor Emma Goyne, who's represented me as well. I thank you for that, Councillor Goyne. Moving now on to 4.2.2, a letter from the Premier. I'd like to table a letter from the Premier, the Honourable Jeremy Rockcliffe MP, dated the 13th of June, regarding the timing of the state budget. And the Premier writes, all our government's election commitments will be delivered in full and will be subject to the approval of both Houses of Parliament as part of the 2024-25 state budget process. And I table that one. Thank you. 4.3, council workshops as listed in the agenda. And 4.4, tabling of petitions. CEO, you have an electronic petition to table.
Thank you, Mayor. We've received an electronic petition in seeking an elector poll in relation to the High Performance Centre. That is currently being assessed by staff in terms of its compliance, and we'll provide a report to the next meeting. And in the meantime, we'll be working with the Tasmanian Electoral Commission to develop the elector poll.
Thank you, CEO. Moving now to 4.5, reports from outside bodies. The Copping Refuse Disposal Site Joint Authority. Anything to report, Councillor Walker?
Nothing at this point in the agenda.
Thank you. Moving on to Tas Waste South. I table a copy of the Tas Waste South Strategic Plan for 2024-2027. Thank you, CEO. Moving on to Tas Water Corporation. I will attend the General meeting in Launceston Thursday of next week, the 27th of June, and I'll provide an overview of that meeting at our next council meeting. Moving on to the Greater Hobart Committee, we're yet to settle a date. However, I'm reliably informed that the advisors group, which our CEO is a key member, is meeting next week, and my hope is that a date will fall out of those discussions, and I'll advise colleagues in due course. As you'd appreciate, we haven't met since the election, so it's imperative from our perspective that we have an opportunity to sit around the table, particularly with some of the newer ministerial faces. Now moving on, I understand that Councillor Hunter, as a representative on the Australian Coastal Councils Association, would like to table and speak to her report on the recent conference she attended. In line with past practice, Councillor Hunter, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As Council's representative on the Australian Coastal Councils Association, I was fortunate to attend the annual 3-day conference late last month in McLaren Vale, South Australia. Conference presentations included valuable insight into the research and initiatives currently being undertaken by all levels of government around the country. Some highlights included a presentation from climate scientist Dr. Kathleen McInnes, who reiterated that sea level rise won't stop in the year 2100, and therefore we need to plan beyond the time frame we currently plan for. She also made it clear that sea level rise is not consistent around the globe, and that the east coast of Tasmania is a hotspot due to its warm currents. At present, sea level is rising here at approximately 6 to 8 millimetres per year. Additionally, a presentation from the Australian Insurance Council's Chief Operating Officer, Kylie McFarlane, relayed that their organisation recently released the BARD report, which is available on their website, about houses that are becoming uninhabitable. She emphasised that sea level rise is the most accurate hazard we can plan for, and therefore the Insurance Council is keen to work with local government as to where building should be allowed to occur moving forward, and that the federal and state governments need to seriously consider putting buyback schemes into place now. Furthermore, a presentation from Jackie White, the chair of the Victorian Marine and Coastal Council, about their report they recently commissioned to identify the cost of sea level rise across their state in Victoria, called the Compass Report. What they found was that for every dollar spent now would save $4 in the future. This report cost them $150,000 and is something I think Clarence and other Tasmanian coastal councils could advocate to be completed in Tasmania to the state government. The conference was well worth attending, and I highly recommend that next year our council sends at least one council officer and perhaps even the CEO, as several were in attendance. A communique was drafted at the end of the conference and has since been endorsed by the committee. This reads, in May 2024, the Australian Coastal Councils Association consulted with delegates attending the Coastal Councils Conference in McLaren Vale to identify issues of current concern to councils in Australia's coastal areas. The priority issues and proposed future directions were presented at the conference. The delegates, representing coastal councils and other coastal stakeholders from around Australia, endorsed the need for the following key initiatives. We call on the Australian state and territory governments to work with local government to urgently develop a coordinated national response to coastal climate risks and other hazards, including rising sea levels, more severe extreme weather events, and widespread coastal erosion. Australia's coastal councils and communities acknowledge and welcome the Australian Government's 2022 establishment of the Disaster Ready Fund, which provides up to $200 million a year to fund natural disaster resilience and risk reduction over 5 years from 2023 to 24. However, we believe this is not sufficient to meet the projected demand for effective coastal adaptation and risk reduction actions at a national scale over the course of this century and beyond. We therefore call on the Australian Government, in collaboration with states and territories, to establish an ongoing National Coastal Adaptation Fund administered by the National Coastal Adaptation Working Group, reporting to the National Emergency Management Ministers and Planning Ministers. The role of this working group would include integrating coastal governance arrangements between the 3 tiers of government, developing and implementing a national program to coordinate coastal adaptation planning, acknowledging and integrating the coastal adaptation knowledge and cultural connections of First Nations people, maintaining up-to-date standardised hazard data collection, analysis and accessibility, implementing disaster resilience actions to mitigate the increasing risks associated with projected sea level rise, storm surge and more frequent and severe weather events, adopting an evidence-based approach to the economic implications of delaying action to manage sea level rise, storm surge and coastal hazards, developing a framework and tools to address coastal planning issues beyond 2100, including retreat, insurance, and avoiding the placement of assets at risk of inundation, and allocating significant funding for ocean and shoreline research. The scale of dealing effectively with coastal hazards along Australia's vast coastline requires a national approach, and I seek colleagues' support to consider this information and what we can do in the future.
Councillor Hunter, thank you very much.
No Mulder to the rescue this time.
Colleagues, are there any other reports from council and special committees and other representative bodies? There being none, we move now on to 4.6, weekly briefing reports. The weekly briefing reports of the 27th of May, the 3rd and 10th of June 2024 have been circulated to councillors. Are there any matters arising? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. On the 27th of May 2024, Begonia Street and Malana Road intersection upgrade. It refers to, on the attachment, that works are forecast to be undertaken in August 2024, depending on the outcome of the tender process and contractor availability. My question is in relation to the sealing and traffic calming measures that are to be implemented on the gravel section of Begonia Road. And I seek advice, Mr Mayor, as to when works will actually commence on that road, and the calming measures that have been approved by Council, well, they will be actually undertaken at the same time.
Excellent question. Thank you, Councillor James. Mr Graham.
Through Mr Mayor, because this is just involving the intersection of Begonia Street and Malana Road, I'll provide councillors with an update on the sealing of the gravel section of Begonia Street.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Anything else, Councillor James?
Thanks.
Colleagues, any other matters arising for the weekly briefing reports? There being none, I note that we're at the end of our omnibus items. Can I please have a move up of the item of the motion and the seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Chong, thank you very much. All those in favour? Moving on, that's so passed. Item number 5, public question time. It was carried, so Councillor Walker didn't vote for that. Yep.
Well, he was going to vote against.
Well, let's bring our best selves. Let's put it again. All right. All those in favour of the omnibus items, please raise their hand. All right. Anyone against? There we have it. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item number 5, public question time. Public questions on notice. There are a number in the agenda, and the CEO will ask you to read those questions and to provide an answer, please.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a number of questions tonight. The first two questions come from Mr David Griggs of Risdon. In respect to the first question regarding the car park behind the Rosny Post Office, Mr Griggs asks, non-suitable tree species have been removed from this area. I'm asking for suitable deciduous tree species to be replanted in this area. There are many species suitable for this location, with protection around planted trees using water points for these trees to help with establishment. The spots are already available. This area is a real heat bank in the summer months. The answer to that question is that the Bayfield Street car park is included in the City Heart Master Plan. This car park is proposed to transition to a new mixed-use community destination with car parking and an urban plaza that connects with adjoining retail and commercial premises. The inclusion of street trees will be an important part of redeveloping this site. Until we progress into design, it would be premature to plant replacement trees in spaces where they may need to be removed to accommodate the future plans. Mr Griggs has a second question in relation to Pass Road north of Glebe Hill. Mr Griggs writes, in the 2023-24 council budget, money was allocated for reconstruction of the section of Pass Road north of Glebe Hill. To date, no work has started. Has this been abandoned? What is happening, as no information has been put out there? Through you, Mayor, I might ask Mr Graham, if that's okay.
Thank you.
A response?
Mr Graham.
Through you, Mr Mayor. On the 28th of August 2023, Council authorised officers to commence consultation with property owners between Glebe Hill Road and Connor Place on additional land which may be required for the future upgrade of Pass Road. For the section north of Winterbourne Avenue, officers have in principle support from affected landowners. The design is being completed with also in principle support from utility organisations for their future plans in order to report to Council in the coming months for approval of the land acquisition process, and then we will finalise tender documents will follow, which the intent is to try to tender this later this year. Consultation is continuing for the future upgrade of Pass Road south of Winterbourne Road.
Thank you, Mr Graham. Ms Hertz?
Thank you, Mayor. Our next questions are from Ms Shannon Hurd of Belrive. The first question relates to Councillor's conflict of interest in respect to the AFL High Performance Centre. Ms Hurd writes, please advise if any Clarence City councillor has previously declared a conflict of interest in relation to voting on the motion in December 2023 to locate the AFL High Performance Centre at the Charles Sand Park Memorial Park and Rosny Park sites, or if any councillor holds any financial interest such as land or property within 1.5 kilometres or work affiliation in the choice of location of the AFL High Performance Centre in those sites. The answer to that question is that councillors are required to declare any conflicts of interest in respect to council meeting agenda items at the start of each meeting. Notified conflicts are reported in the minutes of each meeting. It is a matter for each councillor to declare any reportable conflict of interest. The second question relates to the spread of environmental weeds. The question is, the spread of environmental weeds can cause major damage to primary producers in the Clarence local government area, particularly Chilean needlegrass, which can be easily spread on the tyres of vehicles and underfoot, and which can affect livestock such as cattle and in particular sheep. It is my understanding that Chilean needlegrass was introduced to the top edges of the Rosny Park, the old golf course site, as a result of poor biosecurity in the course of construction of the Tasman Highway in the area of Rosny Park. Can Council please advise what mitigation strategy it intends to use to stop the spread of Chilean needlegrass currently located in contained patches at the top of Rosny Parkland area when engaging contractors to work in the park, particularly in the future of any earth or construction work related to the City Heart Plan? The answer to that question is the infestation of Chilean needlegrass was first recorded at this site in November 23. An additional survey by an experienced weed contractor occurred 2 weeks later across the whole of the Rosny parklands, and no further plants were discovered at that time, even directly adjacent to the Tasman Highway, where there are historic CNG records on the Department of State Growth land. In line with Council's weed management strategy, this declared weed was treated immediately by an experienced contractor after its discovery. The site has since been incorporated into our annual needlegrass control program and has follow-up treatment in June 2024. The site has been formally recorded and mowing operators have been avoiding the site, including a 20-metre buffer to reduce the risk of spreading seed during the seed-bearing time of the year, which is November through to January. Any contractors working in the vicinity of the infestation are advised to avoid the site and that no excavation of the soil or removal of topsoil is permitted under any circumstances without approval and hygiene management protocols in place. The management of contaminated soil during any earth moving and construction works will be covered by the construction and environmental management plan required under any planning permit and any contract documentation.
Thank you, sir. Move on to Mr Bradley Walker's questions, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr Walker of Howrah asked 2 questions. The first is in respect to Natural Areas Volunteer Coordinator. The question is that since Council's previous Natural Areas Volunteer Coordinator left on the 16th of June 2023, has the Council appointed a new person for this role, and if not, why not? The answer to that question is Council has had 2 staff covering this position over the past 12 months to ensure that we continue to support the land and coast care groups in Clarence. The role responsibilities have been reviewed during this period and some additional funding sought to increase the hours of this position as this position has been difficult to retain staff in due to the part-time nature of the role previously. The revised position will be advertised this month. The second question relates to land care groups. Mr Walker asks, does Council see land care groups that actively assist in the upkeep, restoration and management of natural areas within Clarence City Council local government area as stakeholders for future council works, development applications and area management or master plans that are within or adjacent to their designated areas? If so, does Council contact the groups for such involvement and input, or does Council expect land care groups to make submissions the same way as an individual community member could? The answer to that question is that land and coast care volunteers are highly valued community groups and are considered a valued stakeholder group due to the range of areas they represent. Where there is an active group working in an area that Council is undertaking engagement with the community on, we seek to engage with that group directly as an identified stakeholder. Consultation and engagement plans are prepared for a range of projects and plans that Council works on, and it is through this process that stakeholders and community groups are identified. We welcome submissions from individuals, organisations and community groups along with experts on any consultation, and we consider all feedback along with regulatory and expert opinions in any decision-making and project work. Regarding development applications, this process is administered by our planning department, and as such there is no formal notification to groups who work in a reserve. There are clear state government legislated advertising processes that apply to planning applications, and these are followed. Groups can find out about these in the Mercury newspaper. By groups collaborating with Council on proposed works within Council reserves, the Natural Area Volunteer Coordinator can then keep the register of groups and locations where work is occurring. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Moving now on to 5.3, answers to previous questions taken on notice. There's an answer to a question asked by Mr Michael Figg from our last meeting, and that's listed in the agenda. Moving on to 5.4, questions without notice. Are there any questions from the gallery this evening? All right. Okay, we'll start over this side with you, sir, and your name and suburb, please, if you come to the microphone. I will just remind everyone that public question time is a time to ask questions, not to make statements, and we keep them as brief as possible, please. Thank you, sir. Your name and suburb, please.
Hi, my name is Robert Stewart. My suburb is Rosny. My question is to the Mayor of Clarence City Council and through the Mayor to each of the councillors. Some of the councillors in this chamber appear to have close associates within the AFL football clubs in Tasmania, including the Tasmania Devils. A handful are even foundation members of the AFL Tasmania Devils Football Club. Will those councillors be declaring their interest, whether it is pecuniary, a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest? Leaving the chamber, not engaging in any discussion or not voting on any matter that relates to the AFL High Performance Centre, the future home, club rooms and training administration centre for the AFL Tasmania Devils Football Club.
Thank you for your question. As the CEO stepped out a few moments ago, declaring conflicts is actually up to individual councillors to do that. Having a membership is not a conflict. Thank you for your question. Next question, please. Again, name and suburb, please, ma'am.
Christine Bailey from Montague Bay.
Hello, Miss Bailey.
Council website frequently asked questions on the AFL High Performance Centre states that the community consultation on the next stage of the City Heart Plan will be in Q1 of the 24-25 financial year, which starts in a few weeks' time. Considering that topography, boundaries and existing infrastructure surveys have been conducted over the last month, will Council ensure that any future plans shared are to scale in order for the community to understand the full extent of the proposed development?
Ms Bailey, thank you for your question. Ms Wicks, are you in a position, or the CEO, who would prefer to? CEO, you have first bite.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. To the best of our ability, we'll try to ensure that any plans are to scale, simply because that makes the most sense. But we need to work with other parties to make sure that's the case. So I can't be definitive, but it's certainly our goal.
Thank you. Next question, Mrs Marsh, I believe you had one.
I'm Joanne Marsh-Belrive. It is often quoted that assumption is the mother of all mistakes. In his response to my question on notice on May the 27th, the CEO assumed that my words council leaders meant councillors and suggested that my question would be best directed to councillors individually. Consequently, I wish to restate my question. How would the Mayor describe his understanding of the concept of a social licence to operate and how it relates to the current fierce opposition to the destruction of Rosny's Green Parks corridor?
Thank you for your question, Mrs Marsh. Please take a seat. Take a seat, Mrs Marsh. I'll answer your question. Take a seat. Mrs Marsh, take your seat.
Excuse me, I do have a disability.
Mrs Marsh, I'm waiting for you to take your seat. I'm aware of that.
I'm making my way.
Okay. Please don't answer back. Just take your seat. Now, in regards to social licence, it's something that means different things to different people. You clearly have a very firm view on this particular issue. There are firmly held views on both sides of this debate. From my perspective, it is important at all times that this council listens to their community, not just the vocal people in the community, but all members of the community, which is what we seek to do at all times. You'd be very well aware of another issues before this council it's currently in the Supreme Court, that myself and other colleagues had a view that that particular issue had lost its social licence, so therefore councils then determined to take a course of action. As to what constitutes social licence and the views and opinions of other colleagues is of course a matter for them, and if you'd like to take that up personally with them, please, Mrs Marsh, as always, feel free to do so. Mr Marsh, did you have a question?
My name is Victor Marsh. I live on the Bluff, which is commonly known as the Ferry car park. At the council meeting on May the 27th, Councillor Warren asked for an explanation as to what the tagging of trees in Charles Hare Memorial Park is. After some chortling, the CEO's response indicated that the tagging of trees was part of an environmental assessment process. He said it was an identification number, that's all. My question is, why did the CEO's answer omit to advise that trees are also tagged in Rosny Parklands, the particular tree species tagged, and that the trees are being ecologically assessed because they are the habitat of the critically endangered swift parrot?
Thank you, Mr Marsh. Please take your seat. Before I call on the CEO to provide an answer, I'll just make the point that questions without notice are not opportunities to take pot shots at either officers or excuse me, Mr Marsh, or elected members. It's to ask a question in a genuine attempt to arrive at an answer. It's not to make assumptions or to call into questions people's capacities. CEO. Mr Marsh, I will not have you talking from the gallery. Not tonight, not ever. CEO.
Thank you. The answer to the question is that, as I said on the 27th of May, the trees are tagged as part of an environmental assessment. In terms of the details on those tags or the particular purpose, I don't know anything more at this point in time about individual tags, just simply because I haven't been provided with that information. Once that information is provided through the Department of State Growth, I'll have more of an idea of what that might mean. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Are there any other questions from the gallery? There being none, thank you. We now move on to item 6, deputations by members of the public. Members of the public making a deputation are reminded that they are limited to 3 minutes and a timer will sound at the end of that time. And in the interest of fairness, I will strictly enforce the time limit. When you're called to the microphone, please say your name and your suburb. CEO, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first deputation tonight is from Mr Richard Bingham in regard to the expansion of the Derwent ferry service.
Thank you, Mr Bingham.
Thanks, Mayor. My name's Richard Bingham. I live in Geilston Bay, but I'm here representing the Lindisfarne Sailing Club. We've provided to Council as a written submission, which I won't go through, but it sets out the public interest reasons why you should accept our offer to share the Lindisfarne Sailing Club's site to provide a ferry terminal in Lindisfarne. We're pleased to see that the recommendation in your papers proposes in principle support for our site and that the alternative secondary site at Natone Street is supported only if ours proves not viable. But I do have to express some frustration about the time that the process is taking. I'll make 3 points in what remains of my 3 minutes. The first is to reiterate our commitment to work constructively with your council and our neighbours to get a ferry service into Lindisfarne quickly. We note that notwithstanding the expressed in principle support for our site, you're proposing further community consultation on the site options. We will keep working with you while this is going on to minimise further delays. The second point concerns the future location of our club. We want to be able to continue to sail from our traditional site as we have for 70 years. We also want to again offer our clubhouse to the community users who we listed in our written submission to you and to others. However, as you know, we're unable to obtain public liability insurance cover for our clubhouse due to its structural inadequacies. This means that we will need to arrange for our members to sail at another location next summer. We're actively canvassing options. We're very grateful for the support we've had from the sailing community in providing us with those options, notably Belrive Yacht Club, the Royal Yacht Club, Lauderdale Yacht Club, Montrose Bay Yacht Club and Australian Sailing. The third related point which I'll make concerns the timing of the process from here. As things currently stand, in the absence of our public liability cover, we will need to speak seriously to our members at our AGM on the 25th of July about whether to commence winding up our club and if so, when. Our committee and members have been very patient over the past 2 years since we first commenced discussions with government about using our site for the ferry. But we don't have extensive reserves, and we can't keep the club going on its current care and maintenance basis, which costs us around $22,000 a year, without income from memberships, boat storage or user fees. For us, the longer the ferry project takes, the harder it will be for us to keep the club afloat, particularly as we will have to move to another site temporarily. We hear constantly that everybody is keen to progress the ferry service, but your target date of 30th of June 2026 is a very long way off, and it will be very difficult for our club to survive till then. We're not seeking an immediate handout, but we are looking for the speedy endorsement of our site because we believe that's in everybody's interest.
Thank you, Mr Bingham.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Our second deputation tonight is from Mr Patrick Carroll in respect to the planning application for 21 Gellibrand Lane.
Go ahead, Mr Carroll.
Dear Mayor, councillors and staff, my name is Patrick Carroll. I'm from ERA Planning Environment. Thank you for your time this evening to provide you with a deputation on 21 Gellibrand Lane, Opossum Bay. 21 Gellibrand Lane is currently developed by a small shack, and this building is weathered and in disrepair. Tonight we are seeking your support to obtain planning approval to develop a new dwelling at the site. In summary, the proposal is for demolition of the existing buildings, a new one-bedroom dwelling, a patio, bathhouse and car parking, and associated developments such as rainwater tanks, fencing and on-site works. Tonight I have with me Alex Nielsen and Liz Walsh, the architects for the project. Alex and Liz are available to answer any questions you may have regarding the design of the development and how it responds to the environment. You've all had the opportunity to peruse the application documentation and review the officer's report. The officer's report is thorough and details the officer's assessment of the proposal against the planning scheme. We feel that we have put together a strong application. The proposal is reasonable, responds to the topography and site constraints, and performs well against the planning scheme. The design fits in with the surrounding residential development along Gellibrand Lane, and it captures the amazing vistas across the Derwent River, while simultaneously preventing loss of view and amenity to adjoining properties. We have reviewed the officer's recommendation, including the proposed conditions. We do not have any concerns with any of the conditions recommended by your planners. In our view, the proposal is modest and responds well to the requirements of the planning scheme. We seek your support in our application. The siting, scale and design of the dwelling is considered and site constraints are well resolved. The proposal is consistent with the prevailing nature of residential development in the area. I'd welcome any questions from the council, and if there are none, I thank you for the opportunity this evening.
Thank you, Mr Carroll. Thank you very much. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Third deputation tonight is from Mr Jerome McGee in relation to the High Performance Centre.
Hi, how are you going? Thanks for having me. Jerome McGee from Acton Park. I've been a keen observer of the AFL Football Club incarnation and also the debate with the High Performance Centre, so I just thought I'd come along today and have my view. Obviously it's been an emotional time for many people within the municipality. I'd like to see the emotion come out of a matter and the big picture taken into consideration. Think about what's best for our municipality residents and our ratepayers, and also be mindful that the employees of the Tasmanian Football Club will hopefully be ratepayers here in Clarence as well. Some of the facts I've found as well, 1 in 4 of Tasmanians in a Roy Morgan research poll in 2018 had confirmed an interest in AFL football, and postcode 7018 was one of the 5 top postcodes where the Tasmanian Devils members have come from, so potentially the first. The High Performance Centre will provide many high-level opportunities, social and economic advantages, including providing a place of opportunity for those wanting to aspire to reach the highest level in the sport. Tasmania's football club will likely have a gross revenue of in excess of $50 million. I fear that if decisions aren't made in a timely manner, then the opportunity will be lost for this municipality to host the High Performance Centre. It will bring many players, staff and supporters to the area, which will only boost economic activity within the city, namely the local cafes, restaurants and retailers, whilst retaining public use amenities such as open space and walking tracks. Question of why two ovals. Two oval venues provide sufficient facilities to enable the club to grow and be more sustainable. It allows the club to spread use across the two playing fields, protecting them from overuse whilst catering for future patient growth in the area. In relation to Charles Hand Park, which I know has been quite a contentious point in this matter, I have found it in the City Heart Plan that it was included in the City Heart Plan for accommodation on part of a site as well. So this is not the first time it's been proposed for development. Also, I find that the slogan for will be a playground for an elite few to be doesn't really reach the mark. High Performance Centre will provide many opportunities for all genders, all ages. Youngsters who aspire to play AFL at the highest level, akin to the Tasmanian Institute of Sport, for example. I commend the group for their impetus to keep open space within this part of the municipality.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Our fourth deputation tonight is from Ms Natalie Davis on behalf of Ms Shannon Hurd regarding the Rosny Park Walking Group.
Good evening, Ms Davis.
Hi, I'm Nat Davis from Belrive. In early May, the Save Rosny's Park Group decided to meet in Rosny Park to walk around, note the features of the park and to demonstrate and discuss why the AFL High Performance Training Centre isn't a suitable development for Rosny's parks. The Clarence City Council currently proposes for Charlestown Memorial Park and Rosny Park to house two MCG-sized ovals along with administration and player facilities. The Save Rosny Parks group chooses to advocate for the protection of these park areas for future generations because of their historical significance, their mental and physical health benefits, the social benefits of having a central parkland, their aesthetics, and because of the 180 plus mature trees and flora which provide habitats for numerous animals and bird fauna and may include feeding areas for the critically endangered swift parrot. We advertised the first walk to the wider community and invited everyone along so that we could speak directly with residents to gauge their views, to provide information and to help demonstrate the dimensions of the proposed buildings and playing fields. That walk was also an opportunity to convey key messages to residents, such as the importance of working together as a community for better outcomes, fostering community cohesion, and to clarify that the group is not opposed to the High Performance Training Centre, but rather think it should be situated in a more suitable location. It was also a great chance to answer questions from people who are getting so many mixed messages on the issues. There is confusion and disinformation on social media and an ongoing media blitz which adds to the melee of half-truths, half-facts and unknowns, causing community division. At that first walk, we discussed the heights and depths of the landscape and what cutting and filling to achieve level playing fields might look like. We shared our appreciation of the stately trees, the creek and waterhole, and the soothing sounds of the bird life teeming about us in the tree canopies. That day, 90 people came along and it was received so successfully that we decided to do another one the following weekend, and then another. Last weekend marked our fourth walk. Attendees, young and old, two-legged or four, continue to be a source of positive engagement, interesting fact-sharing and awareness building, with some community members previously unaware that they could access the public Rosny Park because its presence and uses have not been advertised. Those who regularly use the park speak of its serenity and openness, while those who are newcomers find an appreciation for the beauty, birdsong, majestic gums, wattles, pines and other flora right here in the heart of Rosny and open for all to use. We've come to understand that the Walk in the Park activity unites people from all corners of our community in their love of green spaces. We've met people who grew up around Charlestown and Rosny Parks and enjoyed hearing a story or two of how they used to use them when they were young. We thought it would be a wonderful idea to weave those stories into the fabric of the City Heart Plan with interpretive signage and artwork. All Clarence City councillors have been invited to join us on our Sunday walk, but to date only one has attended. We continue to extend a warm invitation to all Clarence councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Davis. Sir, yeah.
Thank you. Our final deputation tonight is from Ms Michelle Laffer in respect to the High Performance Centre.
Good evening, Ms Laffer.
Michelle Laffer, Belrive. On ABC Radio 10 June, the Mayor of Clarence said, "My very firm view is that there is overwhelming support throughout the Clarence community for the High Performance Centre to be built in Rosny." Close quote. I don't think the evidence stacks up for this view. The 4-week online survey of last October used to support the selection of Rosny showed just 317 Clarence residents favouring an HPC across Rosny Parklands and Charles Hand Park. At the time, this was termed strong support. But a few months later, 1,014 Clarence electors signed the Save Rosny's Parks paper petition opposing an HPC in the parks. If 317 for an HPC in Rosny's Parks is strong support, what should we call 1,014 against an HPC in Rosny's Parks? Councillor Beth Warren tabled the Save Rosny's Parks petition at the council meeting of 18 March. The Mayor then tabled a petition in support of the Rosny AFL High Performance Centre. He announced this online petition had returned 2,906 signatures, but did not at the same time state that it was open to anyone anywhere in Australia. In fact, despite promotion on the 23,000-member Yes AFL Team Yes Stadium Facebook page, this petition only achieved 935 signatures from Clarence, less than the number achieved by Save Rosny's Parks. Moreover, although the petition listed 12 supposed benefits of an HPC in Rosny, every one of these would apply wherever the HPC is located. Now to the public meeting of 15 May, brought as a result of the Save Rosny's Parks petition. All the community were welcome, including those supporting an HPC in Rosny. Indeed, on the 1st of May, the Mayor posted details about the meeting to the Yes AFL Team Yes Stadium Facebook page, encouraging all voices to be heard. However, it turned out the public meeting was packed out with passionate, well-informed community members who were overwhelmingly in support of preserving their treasured parks. All 6 motions of the Save Rosny's Parks group were passed resoundingly, with something like 400 people for to 40 against. Since January, community members who believe in preserving their public parks for all have been meeting, hand-collecting signatures, delivering flyers. Hundreds attended a rally in Charles Hand Park in February and hundreds attended the public meeting in May. There's a popular walk and talk in the park every Sunday, all welcome. It takes conviction and a strong support base to see such numbers at such a variety of events over a sustained period. So much for overwhelming support to put the High Performance Centre in Rosny. So much for the Save Rosny's Parks movement representing a small section of the very vocal section of the community, to again quote the Mayor. I think if the HPC goes to Kingborough, Cambridge, Clarence Plains or elsewhere, there won't be any sustained community movement to bring it back to Rosny. Why? Because the community understands that any benefits of the HPC will spread to all of Hobart and Tasmania, wherever it's located. Thank you.
Right, I now advise that Council intends to act as a planning authority under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993. Moving on to item 7.1. Which is a planning application for 21 Gellibrand Lane, Opossum Bay, for a dwelling. I'll call for a mover, please. Yes, Mulder, thank you. Excuse me. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hume, thank you. Councillor Mulder.
They're fairly straightforward. The one objection we've got, and I took the opportunity to go and have a look at this, it arises from the fact that our planning scheme is just out of sync with reality. I've said this a dozen times before. We go in, we develop a new planning scheme and we impose a zone on an already developed area that doesn't meet the requirements of that zone. And then you end up with this convoluted rubbish that we have today. The only obstacle with this thing is the size of an embankment wall, which I'm informed isn't, and this is my opinion, and I don't live next door, so of course you've got to take it in the fact the impact it has on the people who are most associated with it. The fact is that it is within the requirements of the planning scheme, and there's not much we can do about that. But I just raised to make the point is that yes, it's a good development. It's a lot less than what could be there. A lot of the requirements are there. But we really do need to go and look at this because this whole area is in that same situation. I mean, recently we had a situation in the area where people tried to combine a block, but because the planning scheme said that this was the minimum lot size, even combining two lots of land didn't make it a minimum lot size, and therefore we weren't even allowed to enlarge a minimum lot size. Of course, this council had the common sense to override that and challenges anyone to appeal it. But it's just my message to those who impose the planning scheme on us, and I'm not talking about our staff, I'm talking about the Office of the Minister for Planning. It's his signature, not the Mayor's signature, that appears on the instrument that creates the Clarence planning scheme. It is a state government policy and it's a state government thing, and for heaven's sake, let's get this instrument to reflect reality rather than pretending what it would have been if it had been a greens field, and it's not. So, having made all those comments, half of which are not relevant to the planning application, and I thank you for your indulgence, Mr Mayor, but it's a point worth making, and I recommend this particular development to my colleagues.
Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Moulder makes some very good points. We've got a planning scheme that's been imposed on us by the Tasmanian government, and then it's up to councils to police it and administer it, and elected members, trying to make objective planning decisions, which, can create a bit of conflict in, that in the rest of our council business we are elected to represent the community, but then when it comes to planning, we've got to try and be objective and apply a scheme that we didn't actually create. Having said that, I went down to meet with a couple of the representatives, neighbours of the development. Councillor Hunter was there as well. I'd like to apologise. My wife was working at the time, so I had my kids with me, so I'd like to apologise for my older son who was running about the house, causing a bit of havoc, but they were both reasonably behaved. But what I saw, their children. The floor is yours, Councillor. But I did see and get an appreciation for the kind of impact the bathhouse wall would have, and it does block some views to the north. But there is a principle in planning across Australia that's applied through almost all schemes that nobody has a right to a view. That's a planning principle across Australia. There is still a lot of view maintained, and in fact I know one of the things that developers proposed is that the wall doesn't go beyond the neighbour's wall, which means it still maintains that 180-degree views across the Derwent, and they do have an absolutely stunning view. But I can see that there's some impact there. But having said that, if you look through the performance criteria on the scheme, a lot of it talks about the scale of development, bulk and so on, that is actually in keeping with the area, and also something that's difficult to maintain given that these are very narrow blocks. So there is nothing from what I can see in the scheme that could give us cause to reject this development, despite the impact it does have on the amenity of the neighbours. Thank you.
Councillor Hume, anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hunter, thank you. And then Councillor James.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I have a question. If approved and once constructed, will the rammed earth wall be considered essentially a boundary fence, and who will be responsible for maintaining that in the future?
Thank you. Mr Marr.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Hunter, for the question. Any boundary wall that they're built on one side or the other, they will essentially form the wall, but they're not a boundary fence. The responsibility is on the party on which the the construction is. There's requirements under the building code with regard to giving notice for any required maintenance or things like that if it's necessary into the future, which is exactly the same as the existing boundary wall that's on the neighbour's side at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Marr.
Thank you. I think my colleagues have already made some relevant statements about this and that it is unfortunate. However, it is in very good faith that the neighbours have come to council with their concerns about the wall, and I really admire and respect their willingness to want to work with their neighbours and have strong neighbourly relationships moving forward. And I know they have written to the proponent seeking to speak with them and see if they can come to some sort of resolution themselves and take into account their considerations. I hope those will be responded to in due course and that they might come to some sort of arrangement out of that. But I can't see any way that we can't approve this matter tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Harder. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I appreciate the correspondence that I've received and in relation to this, and also to the concern from one of the representatives that the bathhouse is at a height that's basically going to impose upon the amenity of his area of the property, and also it's going to have some impact on their privacy in relation to that. And also, Councillor Hunter made an interesting point, and that was also in the correspondence that I received from the representative, and I think it's the adjoining property owner, and that is that he would like to make some, or have some discussion with the developer in relation to having some change, if that's possible, to the height, particularly of the bathhouse and pound, and also in relation to the impact it has on his property. On page 23 of the officer's report, it refers to, amongst other things, sunlight to private open space and windows of the habitable rooms and adjoining properties. In it, it says, and I quote, "The shadow diagrams demonstrate that at least 50% of the private open space at 23 will receive a minimum of 3 hours of sunlight at the 21st of June solstice," unquote, or 21st of June, unquote. So my question, through you, Mr Mayor, to Mr Marr. Mr Marr, I thought that between those 3 hours of minimum sunlight, there had to be at least 100% of private open space, at least 100% of private open space at 23 will receive a minimum of 3 hours. Could you please clarify for me the percentage as distinct from what I thought was 100, but now seems to be 50?
Mr Marr, thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor James, for the question. It's a very similar question that you've asked over the number of the recent council meetings, Councillor James, and the answer has consistently been, with regard to private open space, what council officers consider reasonable and is something that the tribunal has supported, given its genesis from the interim planning scheme, is that there should be a minimum of 50%. A minimum of 3 hours of sunlight to private open space, where not more than 50% of the private open space is covered. However, that's in relation to the minimum amount. On these properties, they have significant open space in excess of that minimum amount, which will receive all-day sun.
Thank you, Mr Marr. Thank you, Councillor James. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor Moulder, right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I appreciate the comments that have been made, and I do understand that, as always, these things have an impact, particularly on the neighbours. In regard to Councillor Hume's suggestion, there is no right to a view. That is partly true, and I must say he didn't say an absolute right, but the bulk and scale is the measure that's being used. And this council, a number of times, has been able to say that, you know, provided there isn't a total blockage of the view, which is what bulk and scale sort of implies, that it's appropriate. But it's all in terms of amenity. And I think of a representative who didn't actually make a representation and certainly didn't lodge an appeal, who lives, an elderly lady who I've known throughout her through most of her life, because she's only a fraction older than I am, but she lives in a street called View Street. And you know what's happened in View Street? At the bottom end of View Street, everyone's built two-storey things that blocks her. Thank you. I thought you'd get that one. So we really have to look, going back to the planning scheme point I was making, one of the great things about living on the Eastern Shore, particularly north of, well, just about anywhere, is the moment you start to creep up the hillsides, it's the amenity of living in Clarence is the view. So if we start now doing what they did in Hobart, can you imagine the people in Parsonage Place when they built the huge big stories right in front of them? Now, we've got to really be concerned about, once again, the planning scheme. And it's not our baby, but we've got to have a look at how do we deal with this question of the view? Or are we going to allow people who have waterfront properties to build huge big buildings that destroy the amenity of living on the Eastern Shore? And one of the great things, when we talk about mental health when it comes to trees in parks, is the middle and far distance views that you get on a daily basis. A lot of the myopia and the eye problems we have in school, the eye specialists will tell you, are because they spend all their time in closed environments and they never get to lift their eyes to the mountains or to the further distances. So those are important issues about lifestyle. And while this government is intent on turning us into Melbourne and Sydney, and we wonder why people are leaving in droves, because they came here to get away from Melbourne and Sydney while we're busy turning it into Melbourne and Sydney. So anyway, those are the issues. But we have a planning scheme and we have what it likes.
Well, never let it be said that the chair occasionally gives a lot of latitude.
Well, let me continue.
Councillor Mulder is always entertaining. We have a motion before the chair, that is that the planning application for dwelling at 21 Gellibrand Drive at Possum Bay be approved subject to conditions and advice. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? So carried. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to item 8. There's nothing in 8.1, 8.2 or 8.3. Moving on to 8.4, which is the Customer Service Charter. I'll call for a mover. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Seconded, Councillor Goyne. Councillor Walker, thank you.
As it stands in the agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Goyne? Thank you. Councillor Hunter, thank you.
Yes, this is actually a very important document for our residents and officers themselves, because they are accountable to what is written in here. And I'd really like to commend the officers and the CEO for this document, particularly 2 items I really like. And one is our customer experience guiding principles, the 3rd point, which is authentic. We are committed to authenticity in our interactions with customers, fostering genuine connections built on trust and sincerity. Our communication is honest, transparent, and reflective of our values, ensuring that every interaction has an aim to help the customer. I think this is quite unique, having authenticity in there, and I think that's brilliant. I think we need to really be moving more towards that. And the second point I really want to highlight that I like is in our commitment to you, and that is the last point, being curious and willing to learn so we can unlock opportunities and better ways to help you. That's fantastic. So thank you so much to the officers. I look forward to rolling this out.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and may I refer to page 4 and in particular to the penultimate paragraph. I'll read the one prior to that. If you are not satisfied with the outcome, you can ask for a review of your complaint by the CEO, who will investigate the matter and contact you about it. Now it reads on, you may seek advice of a councillor who may take up the matter on your behalf. So does that mean that we're going to bring the parties together and that the councillor may be brought into the discussion phase, Mr Mayor? I'm just trying to get a handle on as to what the actual councillor role is in that, and perhaps the Chief Executive Officer may be able, through you, to be able to clarify that for me.
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. It really reflects what we currently do. So in the current circumstances, we try to provide a range of options to people who want to raise an issue with us. And in some cases, that's direct to the officer, direct to my office, or direct to a councillor, and you would obviously raise an elected member request or contact me in some way about that. So it really just reflects what our current practice is.
Thank you. Anything else, Councillor James? That's it. All right, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I should be very brief. I'd like to say well done to council officers for putting together what is a very well-rounded document for us to look at this evening. I have one question only, which relates to, I guess, what would be the future considerations or the next review process of this document, which I wonder whether it could be considered. We talk about people being able to provide feedback, compliments and complaints and all that sort of thing, and yet though when we consult on the drafts, each time we do it, it doesn't mention how we collect that information to feed that into the consideration for the future document. So my question is, are we collating all of our compliments and our complaints that coming through this very policy to be featured as part of the consultation or the review that we do when we do the next one? And if we aren't, that would be the only thing I would say that we should do to improve the background for when we review this document in the future. That's my only question.
Deputy Mayor, thank you. Ms Wicks.
Through you, Mayor, thank you for the question. So as part of this document has been informed by the customer experience strategy, which is in draft form. Through that, all of that feedback will be consolidated and be fed back through into this, which will be informed after the next council election in 2026. I believe, and that will then feed into a revised draft or potentially a new iteration of this document. So, yes.
Thank you, Ms Wicks. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Before I call on Councillor Walker into the debate now and just acknowledge Ms Wicks and her customer service team, the outstanding job they do. And the point the Deputy Mayor raises is a very important one because day in, day out, I see the work we all do, the work that the customer service team does, and I regularly receive feedback from residents and ratepayers about what a wonderful experience it is. So I commend Ms Wicks and her team, thank them for their work, and also on this charter as well. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I endorse your comments. I endorse the comments of Alderman Hunter, and I thank Alderman James, Mayor, for what used to be known in the previous council as alerting me to what we used to refer to as a Von Chong. If you turn to page 4 of the agenda, as Councillor James
of the charter.
did, in the charter, you will see that the actual second sentence, or second last sentence rather, reads, "You many seek advice of a councillor who may take up the matter on your behalf." I assume that should be may.
It was just as a test, but I'm sure we'll get that corrected. Yes. Thank you. So with that amendment, you're happy then to continue moving?
Yes,
thank you, Councillor Walker. All right. Well, the motion is that the Council adopts the Customer Service Charter of 2024. All those in favour with that amendment? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now, colleagues, on to item 8.4.2, which is Copping Refuge Site Joint Disposal Authority proposed rule change. Is there a mover? Councillor Walker, thank you. A seconder, Councillor Chong. Councillor Walker.
Look, thank you. This is likely to be a long meeting. I'd say that the reasoning for the change is listed in the agenda, so I'm intending to move the motion just as listed, and if necessary I will use my reply as required.
Thank you. Councillor Chong.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Eminently sensible amendment, and I seek my colleagues' support.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? There being none, Councillor Walker, right of reply, or we'll just put the motion, shall we? All right, that is that the recommendation as it appears in our papers. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 8.4.3, the Derwent River Ferry Expansion. The Derwent River Ferry Expansion. Move for a mover of the recommendation. Councillor Hume, thank you. A seconder, Councillor Kennedy, thank you. Councillor Hume.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor. So the recommendation, which is now the motion, is to proceed with the Lindisfarne Sailing Club as the preferred site for the Lindisfarne Ferry Terminal, and the second option that was considered by the consultants, which is the Natone Street option, would be a backup if for any reason that is not considered viable. There is a consultant's report attached. That report was given to the I understand it was the Greater Hobart Committee that was doing the work, and we had a briefing on that work in a workshop. The Burberry Consulting created that report and looked at a sort of a very extensive criteria-based assessment of. There were initially 5 sites in Lindisfarne being looked at, but of course 2 were the standout from that criteria-based assessment. And according to that assessment, Lindisfarne Sailing Club comes out marginally ahead. Now, having said that, when it comes to council feeding into this process, we may have other criteria, and I think a key consideration with the Lindisfarne Sailing Club site is the opportunity to help the club to. So part of council's role, I mean, the money that's provided to the Derwent River Ferry Service by the state government through the federal government grant is all going into on-water assets, but there are opportunities to assist the club when it comes to developing terminal facilities, but also creating a flexible space that can help the club to survive and thrive. And it's not just the Lindisfarne Sailing Club that uses that area, but there are a number of other community organisations that are involved in that area as well. I think it's also worth noting that the criteria-based assessment looked at the catchment area. That was one of the things that the Sailing Club came ahead on, but also less exposure to wind, waves and currents. If the Natone Street option is selected, then there would have to be a fairly significant breakwall built, and that would reduce the amount of resources that can go into building the pier itself. And but then, according to the assessment, Natone Street scored higher in proximity to public amenities. I think it's worth noting that amenities such as toilets or kiosks, for example, are things that can actually be built around the terminal as part of that development or as part of longer-term plans. And there was ahead somewhat in terms of saving commuter time, because there is as I understand, the ferry would have to slow down significantly in pulling into the sailing club, and that could add a bit of travel time. But I think when you're looking at the long term, we're probably looking at more cars on our roads, more congestion, high commuter times, I think that difference is probably going to diminish over time. So, yes, there are a number of advantages to pursuing the Lindisfarne Sailing Club option, and I commend the motion to Council.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Kennedy.
Very quickly, thank you, Mr Mayor. And we all workshopped this extensively, so there's nothing further to add from me other than to thank Richard for your deputation tonight and to thank the people from the Lindisfarne Sailing Club for their correspondence to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On page 125 it says, and I quote, "The assessment of the sites at Lindisfarne was complex with the assessment of 2 sites, etc. The following 2 factors result in the Lindisfarne Sailing Club being proposed as the best location. The Sailing Club is particularly supportive of the proposed development and keen to work with Council to develop the proposed infrastructure." So my question is in relation to that, and it's probably premature, so I'm really sort of short-circuiting my question in that regard, but by saying that to develop the proposed infrastructure, does that mean that Council will assist in providing some permanent structure in relation to that terminal at Lindisfarne Bay? Now, I think it's great that it's going there. I think it makes sense, and the tone, in my opinion, doesn't really stack up. But I would like to know, and perhaps
We'll put the question then, Councillor James, but I think there's a very clear answer the CEO will be able to provide to deal with that for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the question. In respect to the work that needs to be done, at this point in time, it is very early in the piece. So the discussion has been about looking at mutually beneficial parts of the development. So what could be co-located, for example, if that's a possibility. But at this point in time, until we've progressed further in terms of consultation and done some more design work, it's very difficult to be precise about any of that, other than to say that we welcome the opportunity to work with the Sailing Club and obviously the Department of State Growth.
Thank you.
So, taking it the next step, on page 129, there is on 7.11, there is a little revenue and expenses statement, and in that it refers to that the terminals will be within council control and expected that some operating costs may impact on each council budget. That's fine. Now, the revenue from the kiosk rental is listed there, and these are all approximate estimated costs, of course. 20,000 advertising at Terminal 5, then there are some offsets, and the balance is basically 25 in and 25 out on that sort of indicative costing at this stage. But my question here is in relation to where that kiosk would be located. Now, I know it's early stages, but can it be considered that that would have to be within, or would it have to be somewhere in proximity to the sailing club rooms in order for that kiosk to operate, or would it have to be a structure outside of that and in close proximity to the actual landing stage of the ferry?
Thank you, Councillor James. CEO, please.
Again, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. At this stage, it's very early in the piece and I can't give you a definitive answer other than to say that the principle we're working on is to try and ensure that there's joint benefit if that is possible. We're obviously looking at those commercial arrangements as a direct offset to any costs that council might have during the period of ownership, if in fact we do have a period of ownership. If there is mutual benefit there for Lindisfarne Sailing Club as well as commuters and the council, then that is obviously something we're keen to pursue.
Thanks, Councillor James. Anyone else wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Wilder, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My concerns with this one are, yes, I know it's the preferred site. It's the preferred site by the Lindisfarne Sailing Club for obvious reasons, and it's also the preferred site, as we understand, of the state government. And as much sympathy as I do have for the Lindisfarne Sailing Club and the opportunity this presents to get themselves out of a predicament I might add, that results from the condition of their buildings and the inability to get insurance, which is a question of the owner's responsibility, not council's responsibility. But and I understand the community benefits of it, and there are many examples of this. But as shall we say, the master of ferry transport on the River Derwent, Mr Bob Clifford, actually is in today's paper with an article suggesting, talking about the Natone Street viability. Now, if anyone knows about this and talk of constructing breakwaters or jetties or other things like that, well, so be it. The Belarive ferry turned out to require a breakwater. And then we built a breakwater that the ferry couldn't tie up to, so that we had to then do a wharf. But the issue here is what's the best location for this thing? And I think that Natone Street is still a viable proponent, but I know that in the end it's not my call, it's not our call to a large extent, it's one of the state government, because in the end they're the ones that have to pick up, we hope, the bill for all this infrastructure on land, etc. and like that. And I appreciate the lifeline that they're giving. My deep concern is that given Lindisfarne Bay, given the fact that it's infill, given the fact that Symonds Park has already been built on infill, it's got shallow issues, it's got issues. There are some moorings out there at the moment. I have concerns about the turning circles that ferries require, because I know it's a major issue in Kangaroo Bay. In fact, the Belarive Yacht Club had to give up half a dozen of its berthing facilities to enable this large ferry to actually turn around in the limited space available. So those are all considerations that need to be made before we plough in to just endorsing a particular site because it has some benefits to the community. I'll be supporting it going out to consultation. I'm fairly sure that it will end up in being Lindisfarne Bay, and I'm also concerned that the nature of the grant that was given to the federal government to the councils also contains the clause that we are responsible for the maintenance of anything and the ongoing development of any facilities built by a federal government grant for at least 5 years, and is beholden on the state government. And I certainly would like that sort of commitment before we go to the final decision on this, that the state government will step up to the plate in 5 years' time and accept their responsibilities for public transport on the Derwent, because rest assured they will be claiming the credit for it.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And I think this is a very exciting potential, as we see in our city from time to time. And of course, what we're doing here is in principle. And I'm very pleased to be supporting the recommendation, now the motion that's before us. And I do agree with many of the points put forward by Councillor Mulder this evening, and I think we'll see some of those things tumble out through the process as it works through, but noting, of course, that there's an alternative secondary site listed in the motion, being Natone Street. Naturally, some of the things like, and I think this is a matter I also raised when we did workshop this, was the ongoing management and maintenance of the sites and where that would land ultimately. Too often we've seen things trickle down to end up on the lap of local government to maintain, ergo our ratepayers, to pay for the maintenance of that. So I think those will be important considerations moving forward. But nothing that we're seeing in the motion before us today gives me any reason for concern that we can't have discussions about those things moving forward, but they are very valid points to make. And I also thank the representatives and the Sailing Club for making what I think have been very well considered and thoughtful and constructive contributions to this discussion. And I do hope that this will see something really positive come out of this for our community and a collaboration with the Sailing Club in due course. So here's hoping, and I'm very pleased to be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Being none, Councillor Hume, right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mayor. In relation to Councillor Moulder's contribution, I mean, this motion is cautious in a way in that it does leave the door open for the Natone Street option should there be technical challenges with the Lindis Farm Sailing Club site that are insurmountable. Yes, there may be some technical challenges with that site, but I note that our Deputy, Mr Bingham, who's also given us some more extensive written notes to back up his deputation, note that there are a number of technical challenges with the Natone Street site, and I'm talking about on water, that may actually make their site more attractive. So I guess it's going to be a matter of there will be further technical work to be done by the consultants that are working on this project to look at the suitability of those sites and the comparison between them. I think this is potentially a great opportunity in terms of not just providing some potential benefit to the Sailing Club, but the number of other users that use their facilities, which include Crew Fitness, Mum Strong, RNS Dance Revolution and the Van Diemen group, plus a number of organisations that book that place on a casual basis for various activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you, colleagues. Moving now on to 8.4.4, Estimates Capital Expenditure Program Fees and Charges for 2024-25. Call for a mover.
Possible to have this done in
Ad seriatim, absolutely.
Thank you.
Sequentially, it does indeed. A little bit of Latin, I'm sure you'd be aware, Mr. Moulder. Councillor Moulder. Latin is not my thing. Yeah. Right, could we do need a mover though? Sorry. We're not going to debate them all point by point. So I'm asking for a mover now to move the recommendation, and then we will vote on them ad seriatim, as we have done in the past. Councillor Hume, thank you. Deputy Mayor, thank you very much. All right. Councillor Hume, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, we've workshopped this extensively. We've had councillors look through and suggest a number of savings from the original budget that was proposed. The officers have gone through the same exercise. Unfortunately, the rate increase is, I'd say, greater than we would have liked it to be. But as a principle, once you look at potential savings and what can be taken from the budget, you get to a point where it's like, without diminishing important and essential services, you can't go any further. one thing that has been added to the budget, which is going to be something that an expense that it appears is going to be imposed on us, but I think is an unnecessary expense. It's the $200,000 that's going to be spent on electopole in relation to the High Performance Centre. But that's something that it's written into the Act, and we won't have a choice, should the necessary signatures be found to have been gathered. But yes, we're looking at a 6.48% rate increase. I understand, though, however, that is lower than the increase that was suggested under the 10-year plan, which I think was CPI plus 3%, something along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I shall be very brief. I'd like to thank council staff for all their hard work in what has been a labour of many months of work and workshops and ongoing discussion with councillors. Striking a budget is never an easy task, particularly with so many competing views and interests, not only around the table, but of course across the entire municipality, and with, of course, the limited revenue that we have, that we strike through our rate base. I was reading something recently that as a tax, councils generally across the nation collect about 3.6% of all taxes that are collected across the country. So it gives you an idea of what we've got to play with as a sector across the nation. Also puts into perspective the value of the work that we do right around the country. So I'm very pleased to be able to support the budget. As Councillor Hume has said, one never likes to be increasing rates, but that's not always something that's in your control when striking a budget. Lots of external factors affect your service delivery, your infrastructure, all of those things that are not always within your control, unfortunately. So I think this is a very sensible budget that continues to serve the city well, and I'm happy to support.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Moulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be, of course, supporting this because it's almost impossible to try to amend anything on the run. And yes, no, I don't want to be here in a continuous sitting for the next 3 weeks as we try to work through the stuff that the workshops have all been through. I make 2 points, though, is that it's a capital expenditure budget, and that eventually, no matter what you say or do or any fancy things you might have about how the capital expenditure program works, eventually this has an impact upon the rates down the track, because there isn't a magic pudding out of which capital expenditure comes. It eventually comes from the rates and setting a portion of those rates aside. And this is where I will sound my second cautionary note about the fact that this council embarked upon an aspirational capital expenditure program at a time when costs of capital expenditure are rising, yet we have committed to a capital expenditure program. It doesn't turn up in this rates things because the preliminary work is going on, but around about next year we will either have to commit to that aspirational projects, and if we do, then our rates are going to start to rise dramatically. The other points will be made when we set the rates. The fees and charges. When I was first elected to this council in 2005, which isn't yesterday, I actually campaigned on a program because I was tied up with the Clarence Junior Football Club where my kids were playing at the time. And I was just stunned to realise that the burghers of the city charge the families of these kids for the ground hire for them to kick the footy around. I thought we were about encouraging junior sport and outside activities. And although, yes, they have to be maintained, and yes, the facilities are done and they're hopelessly inadequate, and we do need more change rooms and more facilities. Now let me throw a furphy in. Won't it be wonderful if we have a high performance centre that is paying premium lease for that land, and we were to hypothecate that lease payment into the development of our junior sports grounds so that we would have the premier sports grounds in the country, because we would have the funding source to put it in to the junior sports, to get the kids from behind their laptops and their phones, and to actually have them participating in sports with the best facilities on the best grounds with zero cost to the ratepayers.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Oh, Councillor Chong, thank you.
Thank you. I will be brief, Mr Mayor. As several of my colleagues have said, this is a well-considered and intensely discussed budget, as they always are. We inevitably, with 12 of us, don't agree on everything. Some of us want some things in, some of us want some things out, but at the end of the day, all of us have to come to a decision that is the best for our city in our collective view. And yes, we all will prefer some bits not to be here, but I think we should all support this because there is a really well-considered thought process gone into this budget, and it's really important that we consider that and think about what we can do best for everybody in our municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Hunter and then Councillor James. She beat you every time, I'm sorry, Councillor James. Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I reflect the same sentiments that have been shared around the table this evening, and particularly Councillor Mulder's when it comes to the capital expenditure program. Being a new councillor, I've really tried to get my head around rates and capital expenditure, depreciation, the long-term financial management plan to make sure we're not going to end up in a bad financial situation down the track. And after spending significant time with council officers, the Chief Financial Officer in particular, who has been very generous with her time, as well as the asset managers, I feel really confident that this council is in a very strong financial position and is planning effectively to continue to be in a strong financial position, even if we do have large capital expenditures at time, but we make a concerted effort to make sure we manage that into the future. So I will be supporting the budget tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and may I say from the outset that I'm disappointed with the 6.4%. I felt that a number of proposals that I put forward were considered, but at the end of the day they were sort of tinking around the edges, and in my opinion I don't think that for the number of times that I turned up to the budget process, and I didn't miss any of those. A number of my colleagues were away or weren't available for some reason or other at a time when I thought it was really important to take it to the next level. But nevertheless, obviously my colleagues have commitments, and that's obviously part of the show that we have in this place. I did express my concern about the salary and wages. That will equate in the 24-25 budget nearly 47% of our budget. It's creeping up, and it's getting to the stage where before long it'll be at least 50 or more. And that is on the basis that my understanding is that we've got a lot of public open space, we've got a lot of parks, etc., that need to be looked after. And there is some constraints, in my opinion, are being placed upon that because of the number of workers from what I believe is the day labour, or from the blue-collar workers, are really pushing to get and cover all these particular parks in the city, whereas in relation to the in-house, that seems to be increasing and so on. The other point that I'd like to make is that the local government council cost index for 23-24 is 3.74%. In the previous council, or when we were discussing the budget in the previous year, we've looked very closely at that, and at times we have been under and over. But this time it's almost double to what the local government council cost index is at 3.74. And I will be saying a little bit about the fees and charges, because initially when at one of our earlier workshops, we did lock in a lot of those increase in charges 3%. And then it seemed to me, and it's my opinion, and it's not necessarily the opinion of others, but that seemed to move forward. And if you look at the rates and charges, they are pretty close to the 6.1 or 6.2 as part of the estimates for the financial year. So I couldn't really understand why in the first round of the meetings we had a 3%, and then after we had sort of moved on to about the 6% level, that the fees and charges for applications, for DAs and for our parks, for our play and sports grounds has sort of jumped by that level. It doesn't mean that it's by that very standard amount, but it does vary from 3 to 4%. So look, I'm disappointed. That's my view, and it doesn't go with any probably count much in this place, but I'm not going to support it. I'm not going to support 6.4 because people are suffering out there in the community. And
I'm not too sure that I appreciate the fact that Alderman James thinks that I don't respect his view, because I do.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder.
And anyway, that is something that I'm concerned about, and I think that there is going to be a lot of pressure put on people to be able to pay their rates, and that will mean that we may have to use our policy for those people who are suffering hardship. And I might say that a lot of people believe it's the last resort for them to come to council and say they can't afford to pay their rates, or they need to enter into a payment plan in order to do that. So again, I spent a lot of time, as many of us have done, over the course of the weeks. I don't think that some of the proposals I put up were quite modest in the extreme. But then when the feedback came back, there was only a small percentage.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Walker, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think that the consideration of budgeting, given that budget is such a long process, that is one of the biggest issues that comes before a council through the year. Traditionally, we have allocated a sole specific meeting to this process and consideration of, and I think we should be doing that going forward again, to put focus of the meeting solely on it. It's a big deal, and I would have thought we could have done it this time round. I would say that the documents that we used to frame the budget were, again, as they were last year, presented in a good fashion that did allow fair inquiry to be done by councillors that were inquisitive about matters, should they wish to take up that opportunity. There are 3 elements in the budget, points A, B and C. Point B is the capital expenditure component, which is respectable, and I would say in this budget has been greatly helped by funding commitments to projects secured during the state election cycle. And I will take time now to thank Jackie Petrusma in particular for all her help and the time she took to submit detailed submissions on behalf of projects that certainly council saw as meritorious, and some individual councillors raised as well. Now, point C is the fees and charges component, which I think should be seen in context with benchmarking with other councils around the Greater Hobart area. And in that context, I think where we sit within the market after this changes is fair and reasonable. So point B and point C, I think, are generally uncontentious and should be supported. And then there's point A, to which I say no way. Clarence residents are like households around the country, going into their 5th quarter of a per capita, or if you like, household recession. Disposable income has dropped by over 7% since 2022. Households are cutting back and making tough choices. This should be a hair shirt budget. there should be OPEX cuts and not OPEX expansions. The public hire and fire councillors to shape the direction, the vision and the values of the area they live in. Bureaucracies are organisms, if you like, that their default setting is to expand everywhere and always. And that's not a slight, that's just how things is. And it's council's role to constrain, to question, to query when things are put towards us, and provide, frank and fearless feedback and push back. We should be coming to this process absolutely exhausted, and I am actually happy to spend the next 3 weeks pruning, cutting and shaving the OPEX budget if that opportunity was to arise. It doesn't look like it will. We just haven't put the effort in to constrain OPEX. Something we've managed to do in the past. I'm so proud of how this council worked during the COVID era, where we kept the rate rise to zero by collaboratively and exhaustively dealing with matters. That hasn't been the case this time around. And there's so many areas that we can take a look at. And again, I will touch on the fact that we're spending tens of thousands, on getting ESG into the mix. Maybe that can be the first step along the line of social credit. And again, there is an absolute mine of resources to look at how bad these programs have been elsewhere, how easily they are to be misrepresented, manipulated. And as I say, you end up with circumstances where ExxonMobil is considered a good guy as far as their environmental social governance go, and a company like Tesla, which if you like is doing more for the environment, you could make a case than many others, gets put on the bad list. Boeing scores well. In fact, the higher Boeing scores, the more their doors fall off. But we'll leave that to the side. Again, going back to this budget, community development is up 15%, city culture is up 26%, and I just think that's far, far too high. I also would note that more than 10 years ago, this council shifted from AAV to capital value. Had the council kept AAV, the households that would be getting smashed right now are effectively the entry-level rental properties and their private equivalents.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Gorn or Councillor Kennedy, do you wish to make a contribution to this debate? There's no need if you'd rather not. We've spent months on this process, so Councillor Kennedy.
We are taking the votes at seriatim.
We are, yes.
Yes,
yes.
okay. Just picking up on one of the points made earlier on, I would like to thank my colleagues and the staff for the work that has been undertaken. I think we have worked very hard through this budget process, and I don't think anyone has taken this lightly at all. And the officers, for those people that haven't been able to make some sessions, they've made themselves available for any questions that we have had at any time. So I just wanted to make that clear. No one likes any price increases at all. We go through this every budget session. It's just the cost of doing business, unfortunately, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Goyne.
I'd also like to reiterate what Councillor Kennedy has said about council staff making themselves available for somebody with a small human and still lagging baby brain. I do appreciate the time that they have taken to discuss my concerns outside of workshops, and also agree with we don't like to see the increases. As someone who has managed rates via payment plans, I do urge the public to reach out to council staff. They're very obliging, and enter into a payment plan before it gets to the next level. So it's not desirable to have the increases, but cost of living is increasing. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne, and thank you, councillors, all for your contributions. I too now enter the debate as a councillor, not as your mayor. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our CEO and our CFO, and indeed all our hard-working officers who have contributed to the development of Council's 2024-25 budget. This has been a lengthy and meticulous process, and I congratulate you on what has been achieved. Our 24-25 budget demonstrates our commitment to supporting the sustainable growth of Clarence while creating a more resilient community for the future. Our aim is always to respond to the needs and expectations of our community. But importantly, this year, we've also sought to minimise the impact of the rising cost of living on our residents and businesses. The budget incorporates a rate increase of 6.48%. This represents a responsible balance between sustainably managing increasing costs, maintaining our infrastructure and minimising financial impacts on our ratepayers. The centrepiece of the budget is a $21.6 million capital works program which prioritises critical renewal projects as well as new infrastructure developments to support future growth opportunities. Highlights of our capital works program include the further expansion of the Clarence Foreshore Trail, upgrades to the Bayview Park playground and toilet renewal, Clarendon Vale Oval lighting and pavilion design and construction, and further progress on the proposed Anzac Park Community Sports Pavilion. We all know Clarence is an appealing and dynamic place to live, work and play. This is evidenced by the fact that Council's planning approvals remain consistently higher than in other parts of the state, despite rising construction costs and land prices. In order to manage this projected growth across the city, we have prioritised the development, design and delivery of master plans for key areas. We want to harness new development to ensure that it delivers true social, economic and environmental benefits to our community. Rising costs, particularly in construction, also affect Capital's own capital works, and careful consideration has been given to ensuring existing assets are maintained alongside the delivery of new projects. Council is also continuing to invest significantly in future-proofing the city, with a further $2.14 million to be spent on priority stormwater upgrades, critical to environmental and community health. Keeping people safe on our roads is another key budget priority for Council, and this year we've budgeted $2.5 million for major dig-outs and pavement reconstruction, $1.42 million for footpath, curb and gutter renewal, $1.3 million for road resealing, and another $875,000 for footpath, curb and gutter reseal preparation. Of course, we will continue to carry out our general council responsibilities to the highest possible standards throughout the year. These include waste and recycling, animal management, issuing of permits, certificates, notices and orders, and assisting with building and plumbing matters. Clarence boasts one of the strongest financial positions of any council in Tasmania, and this year's budget continues our consistent trend of responsible fiscal management. As stewards of our vibrant city, I am extraordinarily proud that Council is committed to fostering a thriving, inclusive and sustainable environment for all residents and businesses in the Clarence community. Councillor Hume, your right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing that was remiss of me when I spoke in favour of the motion earlier was to, as other colleagues have done, thank the officers for the incredible amount of hard work that was put into preparing the budget, to briefing councillors on the budget. A lot of the public doesn't see the work that goes into this, and even councillors themselves don't see a lot of the work that goes on behind the scenes that the officers do, preparing the budget, interrogating the budget, working on the budget, but also there's a lot of hard work that goes into it by councillors themselves. And this is done over a series of workshops for many hours. We have these, several 5-hour workshops to go through this process. And out of the session of those workshops, there are also queries sent and suggestions made by councillors who look through it in their own time. So I want to thank my colleagues as well, and I make that point because I don't think it's correct to say that we haven't worked hard on the budget and queried the budget quite extensively. 6.48, okay, it doesn't sound like a great figure, but I think it's worth noting that on a regular house, it probably works out to about, and we're given the figures, I can't remember the exact figures, but it's something like a cup of coffee every fortnight, I think it was. So look, yes, it sounds like a large amount, but I believe we were at the point where if we were to cut any further, it would have been cutting into services that the community rely on, the community really value. And as a ratepayer, one thing I really like to see from my council are excellent services. I think it's worth explaining for the public in the gallery and also those watching at home that when Councillor Mulder was talking about the effect of increased capital on the rates, one thing I think a lot of people are aware of is that the CapEx budget is funded by a number of different sources but not by the rates. However, the point he was making is that so the rates directly fund only the OPEX budget, but that's the way we budget. But his point was about the impact that has in terms of the maintenance of those assets and the ongoing depreciation of those assets. And I think he also made an important. Well, I would say though that we are a growing city and we're growing faster than a lot of other municipalities. So we need good infrastructure, not just for that growth, but also we need to maintain the infrastructure we have to a high standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. So, colleagues, I will put the motions ad seriatim. That is, I'll put the motion in three parts, A, B and C. And the first one, Part A, and that is that Council adopts the estimates for financial year 2024-2025 as set out at Attachment 1. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Those against? Declare that carried. Part B of the motion adopts a capital expenditure program for financial year 2024-2025 as set out at Attachment 2. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Part C, that Council adopts a list of fees and charges for financial year 2024-2025 as set out at Attachment 3. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Colleagues, thank you very much. Moving now on to item 8.4.5, Rates and Charges Policy and Recovery of Outstanding Rates Policy. Is there an amendment? Councillor Walker.
There is an amendment as circulated, which is to include after the words equity and efficiency.
Do we have that available on the screen? Okay. So just so that would be A or B?
No, No, it's actually.
Sorry, A.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that would be, just so I've got this right, Councillor Walker, the Council adopts the updated rates and charges policy 2024 as amended.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor James.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Let's remicrowave the rating mechanism we use, which is capital value. As far as the conversation goes, it is the.
Sure.
I'm sure the clock will stop, but I haven't seen anything circulated. I don't have anything in front of me.
Do we have a copy for Councillor Mulder? That was circulated via email Friday afternoon.
Well, some of us are still in the dark ages, Mr Mayor. We rely.
Well, no, I received your email Friday afternoon, I think, Councillor Mulder. Is there a copy for Councillor Mulder, please, of the amended policy? No, I left mine in my office, I'm sorry.
Let's see.
I'm prepared to vote blind, Mr Mayor. It's okay.
You'll take us at a word?
As always.
I trust you. Well, if you turn to 262, well, start by turning to 262, I suppose.
Sorry, we've got a copy here, Councillor Walker, for Councillor Mulder. Thank you, CEO. All right, Councillor Walker.
Now,
we have, thank you. We'll restart the clock, and As mover, thank you, Councillor Walker.
Thank you. So the word efficiency has been added behind the word equity, and the reason for that is that equity is obviously part of the framing, crudely through capacity to pay. There are crude mechanisms that council use around that with rating policies. Capital value, I believe, to be the best model. This council adopted capital value some time ago, but you wouldn't be able to use that if you were truly and absolutely focused 100% on equity. You'd have to get statements from every household and move through other things. So capacity to pay, if you like, is still taken into account through capital value and the other rating systems. But these are also, if you like, using processes of efficiency, and I think it's really important that you've got to balance that out. And now that that's been put into the mix, I'm comfortable that we keep this going as the way we do business. So seek councillor support.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor James? All right. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Mulder.
Mr Mayor, I just take a little bit of concern, and at the workshop on Friday, I know this was raised. The word efficiency, I think, is the wrong word to use with these things. Efficiency is doing the right things. The word effectiveness is what I think you're actually looking for. Effectiveness is doing the right things. Efficiency is doing things the right way. So the difference is one is about outcomes, one is about process. And I would be much more interested in an effective rating mechanism than I would be in an efficient one. So I think that's sort of, if we're going to play, words, but it's not that critical. But I think that's the important message that we need to get about here, because the last thing you want is over efficiency at the expense of getting the right things done. So that's, I think, my contribution in regards to the rates and charges policy. I also will reiterate my desire to see the burden of fixing the grounds and putting in the changing rooms for our young sports people factored back in here, and I look forward to a future rates and our charging policy where we have the means by which to fund the premier sporting facilities for our junior sports people.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Hume, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I've spoken about the quantum of the rates increase, but I think it's also important to point out that one of the other things that we workshopped and that's gone into this policy is a number of changes to the way rates are levied that make the rate space fairer. And I'm pointing to, in the report, the rating of split tenure properties, the changes in terms of rate remission for not-for-profit sporting groups. There's some changes around the general rate remission for commercial development, etc. So, we workshopped those quite extensively, and I think what we have actually is a fairer rating policy that ensures ratepayers contributing their fair share. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Any other colleagues? Deputy Mayor, thank you.
Mr Mayor, I just wanted to rise to briefly congratulate council officers on the work that's gone into the policy development side of what is effectively the underpinning mechanism that council needs to put in place to move forward. I think it's been a document that's been very well considered, and I've appreciated the opportunities to provide input as we've gone through the process, and with the various changes I won't go over all of those, but I am very certain that this will, and to take on the amendment that's been put forward, assist council to efficiently use resources to ensure we have minimal waste, and of course to effectively produce the desired and intended results that we would all like to see from our council budgets moving forward. But these are the sorts of robust policies that we need to underpin all of that work that goes on in the background, as Councillor Hume alluded to earlier. So I'm very pleased to support the motion.
Thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Being none, Councillor Walker, right of reply.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate the comments made. I think it's a robust policy, and I think just highlighting the difference between equity, which is adjusting shares to make equal, and trying to actually rather just find a mechanism which efficiently, if you like, crudely looks for capacity to pay is being achieved in this policy. So, thanks again.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. So the motion is that the Council adopts the updated rates and charges policy 2024 as amended. B, the Council adopts the recovery of outstanding rates policy 2024. I'll put that motion as one motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous, colleagues. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 8.4.6, our annual plan 2024 to 2025. I'll call for a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Seconded to Councillor Kennedy. Thank you. Councillor Hunter.
Yes, it's always amazing to see the volume of work staff in this organisation aim to do over a year. It's quite incredible. So thank you to all those who've put together and continue to work really hard to provide great outcomes and services for the community. Nothing further to add as per the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Kennedy.
No, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Anyone else wishing to speak to this? Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I refer to page 12 of strategic projects, and in particular to the City Heart project. 2019-20 was the year it started, and there is a little story about this on the middle paragraph, and it says, and I better read it because it's necessary, I think, to make sure we get it right. The project will provide a blueprint for the development of places and spaces within the city centre to make the most of opportunities for growth and ensure that changes and develops are coordinated and aligned with the qualities of the place as well as the community's long-term needs and aspirations. I'm not sure what it really means. We're talking about a strategic project here. We're talking about the City Heart project and the status of it preparing for the adoption of the final plan, and that's got a yes in 24-25. So could I have some clarification about what that's... It is a sentence, there's no full stop. So what that sentence implies, please?
Thank you, Councillor James. Ms Wicks, would you like to...
Through you, Mayor. Sure. Well, firstly, we are preparing the final draft to come to Council for consideration and endorsement to go out for final consultation in the community. This is leading towards planning to go towards Q1 24-25. As for this comment, to me it makes sense. Perhaps the punctuation is perhaps a little bit off. I can review that and ensure that that's cleaned up for the next revision.
Thanks, Ms Wicks. Sio, do you have anything you wish to add?
Thank you, Mayor. Just in the context of the City Heart project and the comment that's in there, and we've made this comment a number of times in the recent conversations around the High Performance Centre, the City Heart plan is much more than a plan for the Charles Hand Park and Rosny Parklands area, and deals with the growth of the Rosny Park Activity Centre into a genuine central business district for our city, and includes plans related to urban infill, development of the Warrane suburb as a boundary on the civic centre, transport infrastructure, a whole range of other things beyond just the parks and the infrastructure that's been focused on recently.
Mayor, that could you just clarify that the key pin or the focal of the City Heart project was, as you said, the surrounding areas, including Charles Hand and then down onto Kangaroo Bay and then down into Warrane and so on. But wasn't the Rosny ex-golf course and Charles Hand Park a key part of the city plan?
That was...
Please.
Thank you. That was one part of the City Heart plan, and the reason that it hasn't come to council yet is the work that's been undertaken to re-look at that element of the plan within the context of a high-performance centre should it proceed.
Right, thank you. Any other colleagues wishing to think? Councillor Chong, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I just commend the CEO and the staff on the annual plan? I think it's a really good, clear document that gives all of our community the capacity to look at what we plan to do, why we plan to do it, and the timeframes. And I think it's a really great document for everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. There being no other colleagues wishing to speak, I call upon Councillor Hunter for a reply. Thank you. We'll put the motion then. That is that the annual plan for financial year 24-25 included as attachment 1 to the associated report be approved. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Walker's abstained. Thank you. That's so carried. Moving now on to item 9. First one being 9.1, which is a notice of motion standing in the name of Councillor James. Councillor James, was there an amended motion that you wish to move?
Yes, thanks.
As circulated? Thank you. Is there a seconder to Councillor James's motion? Councillor Hunter, thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I would like, it is on the board so that the colleagues, of course, and the public can actually refer to it. Look, I want to start out and say that the decision of the 11th of December and Part A withdraws it, that this council withdraws its support to be the home of the AFL Performance Centre located in the Rosny Park area and revokes the authorisation for the CEO to negotiate a heads of agreement with the Department of State Growth. The reason for bringing forward my motion, which was listed on the agenda, was to give some credence to the fact that there has been a number of processes that have been undertaken by concerned residents regarding the location of the High Performance Centre, and that is, as we know, there was 1,000 petitioners that obviously signed a petition to hold a public meeting, and that was on the 15th of May 2024. There was about 400 people present, and a number of motions were passed, including the one that I did have on the agenda in its verbatim, as per the action of that meeting, and that was carried almost unanimously. Because of that, there wasn't a necessary follow-up as I believe the residents wanted to happen, and as you know, this council noted that that meeting and those motions were passed. It tended to be, from my opinion, from what I understood from the people, that there was an action taken at that public meeting, and therefore they did take the next step, and that was to seek a elector poll, and that was signed by over, which we believe, 1,200 signatories, because they wanted to get something obviously out in the community, because it seems as though that the initial consultation was not done properly. It didn't reach the majority of Clarence residents, etc. And because of the significance of this issue has been really what has been the comments that have been made by people around that. The point about I want to point out here is that the parks, as they have been highlighted for a high performance centre, is going to basically take away a green corridor, a natural place, parklands, which is in the vicinity of the CBD. Nowhere else in southern Tasmania, amongst any of the councils, I'm able to understand or find out exactly but it seems as though there is no other parkland of this significance in the Charles Hand Park or in the Rosny Parklands that is of a significant nature to be within a 10-minute walking of the CBD to actually access that parkland as part of it as the proposal. In January this year, I went to New Zealand and I actually spent some time in Christchurch. And before my meeting with the Mayor of Christchurch and his executives, I actually sat in the parklands, which is within 5 minutes walk to the council building and the CBD. That area has its own small river. It has obviously trees. It has areas on both banks where there is entertainment. There is obviously a lot of activity at festivals and so on. In New Zealand, they have their parkland within 5 minutes to the CBD. And nowhere else I can understand within Glenorchy, Hobart, and you've got to take the Domain as being well and truly out of the walking distance of the CBD. Popular Walks of Clarence. That book has been a Bible for us to be able to use and obviously refer to, and it's going to be reprinted shortly. I would like to see that on page 9C, where the actual Tasman Bridge to Bellerive component, it stops at the Rosny College. Wouldn't it be great to have that walking track through Rosny, through Charles Hand Park, to enjoy the open area, the trees, the actual, obviously, ambience of that particular place, to join our tracks and trails and promote that next leg of our particular popular walks in Clarence. Once it's lost, it's lost. It's going to be obviously be able to, if it goes ahead, it'll be taken out of the people's opportunity, and we'll lose it forever. Thanks.
Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor James for bringing this motion forward tonight. I think it's really important for us to bring it to the chamber after the public meeting and discuss it, whether it has legs or not. I just think it's important that we do bring it to the chamber and discuss it. Everyone here knows I don't support the location of the High Performance Centre in the Rosny Parklands. However, I don't necessarily think it's good practice to rescind motions that have been endorsed by council in the past. When I became a councillor, I very much said, you know, I have to support whatever we pass as a council and move forward with those decisions. This is a really tricky and complicated matter as we learn more of the community views. I take heart in knowing there will be an electoral poll in the future, and that will give us some greater clarity on where the wider community stands on this issue. I think also given the next notice of motion we're about to discuss gives me some comfort. So I'm not necessarily convinced I will be supporting this motion tonight. And I don't necessarily think it's going to have legs given the voting of this council on the matter every time it's come up in the past. However, I think it's important it's raised tonight, and I think Councillor James, but I'm happy to be swayed and my mind changed if other people have strong views that can convince me otherwise.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Councillor Mulder.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just on the point that Councillor Hunter raises, we're not rescinding. The alternative motion is not a rescission of the previous motion. And I'll claim some credit for having actually drafted the amended one that comes before us, because to go with the original one is just nonsensical. Council has already noted the results of the community consultation and cannot unnote them. Council has already provided in principle support for Clarence to be the home of the AFL High Performance Centre, and did so again, and cannot unprovide it. Proposals for site options have already been submitted and cannot be unsubmitted. That's why I drafted this motion, with the aim of giving intent to what the community meeting did, and why I thank Councillor James for actually going with a motion that is feasible and practical, and which actually gives effect to the intent of that public meeting. That doesn't mean I support it. I just would like to see debate sensible motions that are, in fact, capable of being debated. But I will say straight out now that I circulated a prospective draft motion, probably some 4 or 5 weeks ago now, which simply said that council now wishes to hand it to Kingston. Because the effect of all these motions that we discuss about Rosny not being suitable, and fanciful suggestions that there are other places in Clarence that are suitable, are fanciful, and any attempt by us to move it from the preferred location, and if you don't want it there, that's fine, just understand it'll go to Kingston. The AFL have said so. They have repeatedly said so to us. They've said so, and in this last week, they've come out to the community and said so. Within Clarence, Rosny was deemed to be the preferred site subject to due diligence. And Kingston remains available, subject to the due diligence process. The criteria that we all talk about related to the beginning of the process. We're now in the finals, and we won the final. And if we now want to surrender the premiership, right, and that's our right, we can surrender it. We don't go and start the season all over again. We simply hand it up to the runners-up. And history will record them as having won the premiership, despite the fact we didn't. If that is what you want, you're perfectly entitled to do that, but don't keep coming to me with fictions about other sites in Clarence, because council is not building a high-performance centre anywhere, anytime. The state government and the AFL are the proponents. He who pays the piper calls the tune. All we are doing is saying, at this stage, as a majority of councillors, we will lease to you the land upon which to build it. It's not for us to tell them to build it somewhere else. They're the ones putting the money up. They're the ones who decide. So on that basis, I won't support this motion because it will send a strong message that I don't want a high-performance centre. And 11-1 at the last council meeting, we all sat round here and we locked in behind having a Clarence, about Clarence being the home of the high-performance centre, 11-1. And can I tell you, that means Rosny Park or not at all. So I encourage you to have a look at this and to consider either and recognise that if you vote for this motion, you are basically banishing any prospect of the AFL having their high-performance centre in Clarence, along with all the benefits, including to junior sports field maintenance that I previously raised.
Thank you, Councillor Mulder. Councillor Chong, please.
Mr Mayor, I won't be supporting this motion, and some of my reasons are very similar to Councillor Mulder's. Like I'm sure all of us, have received a myriad of emails from people suggesting a whole raft of places where you could put a high-performance centre. And I suppose it frustrates me for two reasons. Firstly, the presumption that we looked at Charles Ann Park and Rosny Parklands and went, we don't look at anywhere else, where the officers did a lot of work to look at a whole range of possible other sites before deciding that Charles Ann Park and Rosny Parklands were the best site to suggest to the state government for the high-performance centre. There is a whole range of, and Councillor Mulder called them fanciful, and yes, some of them are. Put by the airport, well, light spill, height restrictions, aircrafts, all sorts of reasons why you wouldn't put a stadium right next to the airport, even if there is lots of flat land there. The other reason I can't support it is we've had a petition for an elector poll. I don't know what the result of that elector poll will be, but if we're going to do that, how can we say now we want to withdraw support when we're probably going to commit to getting the community's view on that? I think that's very... Well, yeah, and paying for it. But that's very arrogant of us, I think, to presume that, you know, we're going to do this, but we're going to take away the option before we even start. So I don't think I can support this. Not tonight, not in this form. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chong. Councillor Hume, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I also cannot support this motion, and that won't surprise anyone around this table or in the public. And that's because I stand by my support for Council's decision of the 11th of December. And the reason is because I believe there are incredible economic and social benefits to not just having a high-performance centre built, but having it in our city. Now, next council meeting, we're still working through it, but there will be a report I'll be submitting to council on a tour of high-performance centres in Melbourne and Brisbane. And one of the things that I gained an understanding from that tour, and Councillor Hunter went to those Melbourne sites as well, is what that showed to me is that these types of facilities not only have incredible community benefits, they aren't just for elite sports people. They have facilities that are shared with the public, and they also have economic contributions to their local communities. And because a lot of those benefits and the community programs those places run are dependent on the facilities, then those benefits are even greater where the high performance centres are based. And as other councillors have explained, Rosny is the site. It has to be the site. There was extensive work, as Councillor Chong pointed out, by officers looking at alternative sites. And it wasn't just about council's assessment of what was viable, but also about DSG and the AFL's criteria and what they were prepared to accept. Because let's face it, they're the ones building this thing after all. We can't dictate to them where to put it. And Councillor Mulder is right, it will go to Kingston if it's not based in Rosny. Now, Councillor James talks about green open space. I value green open space. It's very important. It has mental and physical health benefits. It's important for maintaining natural values. And with the high performance centre going ahead, we will still have an abundance of green open space available in the parklands. So not only will we have the benefits of green open space, we will also have the benefits of the high performance centre alongside that. We will have the best of both worlds, and this will create an active and passive recreation zone that is the envy of Tasmania. Now, I asked those who are talking about the loss of green open space, where was the outrage when parklands were taken for the Springhaven development? And where was the outrage when, as Councillor Mulder said in a previous meeting, when the City Heart Plan proposed that a part of the Charles Ham Park be developed into housing? Those who are defenders of our parklands, I would encourage them to reflect on that. I still think that we will have an abundance of parklands connected to our commercial centre and developed into an area that is the envy of Tasmania, with the benefit, economic and social benefits of a high performance centre, the best of both worlds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Kennedy, and then Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's nothing really more that I can add to what I've already said in previous meetings, other than the fact that recently I was at Adelaide Oval, and if anyone's been to that sporting precinct, you will know that that is a very big, magnificent oval with a big cricket pitch, high-performance facilities. I tried to actually, and lights, 3 minutes walk from the CBD, I tried to actually get photos. You can't see. You cannot actually see the structures. For the parklands that surround it, the absolutely magnificent parklands, we're sort of living with our heads buried in the sand, I think. Get out, have a look. You know, I've been such a supporter of green open spaces, public spaces, right throughout my time on council, but we cannot stop this from happening. We've got to look at the future of the future generations, for goodness sake. This is something we cannot deny them. The golf course. Again, with a number of my colleagues around this table, we tried to save this as a sporting precinct for all the reasons for mental health benefits that we all talked about, because that's what that sporting precinct provided. This will do the same. Anyway, you know where I sit on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor
As
Walker.
I sit.
Thank you, and I would like to encourage anybody to go back and watch the 2021 motion on that golf course, because it's basically a snuff movie of killing a golf course. It was well known that the vote that was before the council was going to cut the only player in town that was there, being the YMCA, to be able to negotiate with council, kill it dead and go out to a nebulous expression of interest. That motion on April 2021 was a golf course snuff movie. And there's been no contrition around that, there's just been doubling down. But anyway, let's get back to this. There is no money in nuance, and I can tell you there's even less votes in nuance, but that's where I find myself trying to find a solution that can bring people together. I believe the motion to get relevant players around the table to look at Blunston Arena that I moved last meeting would have been enough of a show of good faith, because Cricket Tasmania want to leave, and it's a magnificent place that could become a white elephant if we aren't careful. I believe that was a show of faith that would have held off the press for an elector poll. But most councillors present did not. So here we are with an elector poll, and no surprise of that when people feel dismissed. The state government's goodwill to this council has been severely tested through this term of council. So taking over the High Performance Centre project and using a development assessment panel appointed by the Planning Commission would surely be in the mix, however, if this motion is successful. But again, this motion is the expression of the majority of those who attended the meeting on 15 May. Not all, to be sure, but the overwhelming majority. Again, the last meeting of council didn't even entertain the motion, which was a conversation around Bunston's future. It was the signature drive for the elector poll, but I don't actually believe this motion is the solution any more than I believe an elector poll won't deliver a paradoxical result for those who have sought it. I find myself in the rare and uncomfortable position of quoting Gough Whitlam, who once quipped, "Only the impotent are pure." Well, I will continue to work towards a pragmatic outcome that preserves the parklands, which is a key natural asset in the area. Some people note other spaces. Well, why didn't that matter? Well, the point of the matter is that the parklands is bigger in scale than the Botanic Gardens. It backs right onto the CBD of Clarence. Through dumb luck, not great management, with this resort, this amazing natural resource is with us, and we're going to squander that inheritance of luck, and that is so disappointing. As I said, I'll continue to work towards those pragmatic outcomes that might see us saving this site, because its importance will grow exponentially over the next few decades. But sadly, this motion increases the risk for things to happen on that site. And I understand the nuance of my position of this motion in not supporting it. Won't survive a 5-second media grab, but I don't think it makes it wrong. Sadly, we could have given the AFL everything they need and most of what they wanted, and preserved the parklands in the entirety. And sadly, I believe time is likely to show that we kicked the ball to Kingborough in how this council voted on the 11th of December 2023.
Councillor Goyne, do you feel like making a contribution?
Why not? Never been one to not have my say on things. So, and I also believe that I was elected to this place on the fact that I stand firm in my opinions, whilst they may not always be the most popular ones. Quite often they are not. And most people have given me their goodwill in the fact that I do stand firm in my opinions, despite not necessarily being popular. We were elected to make decisions, and we made the decision that we made, and I am standing firm in that. However, as much as my son's father would say, I have been known to be a little belligerent. As much as I don't agree with the elector poll, I will look forward to the results. And whilst I believe my choice on the night was the correct one, the results will be telling, and I just urge everybody to make sure that their voices are heard with the elector poll so that we get a good grappling of the numbers and where everyone's opinions lay.
Thank you, Councillor Goyne. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And I'm a little bit puzzled in a way about this particular motion because, and I think Councillor Chong spoke to this, is that it seeks, in my way of thinking, to actually be in advance of the elector poll, when I would have thought that a motion like this would have been more appropriate to have been brought forward after the result of an elector poll, if you are true to your principles in terms of concerns around consultation and all of those sorts of things. So it troubles me from that perspective. I want to touch on the work that was done between Councillor Mulder and Councillor James in respect of the amendment. And even though I appreciate it, it is, in my view, still a rescission motion, in my view, because we still have a situation where we are proposing to withdraw support to be the home of the AFL High Performance Centre located in Rosny Park. Clearly, that's what we provided. In the original motion, we provided in principle support for Clarence to be the home of the AFL High Performance Centre located within Rosny Park CBD. So to me, and that's why in the advice we've received, we've seen it requires an absolute majority. Rescission motions are special motions and need to be managed with caution and with respect, because they are, not as common as the sorts of things we would normally see, and there's very good reason for that. And when I see something like a rescission motion, I think through very carefully in my mind what is at the base or the core of this. Is it something that is legitimately improving something that happened in the past that ought not to have? Can we not deal with it because the motions have already been acted upon? And we've seen the advice around that in respect to some aspects of the motion. Is the person moving the motion really seeking to make the original motion ineffectual by trying to delay or frustrate the process? And I'm not suggesting that's the case here, but these are the sorts of things that I would work through in my mind when I'm weighing up whether or not to support something. Is this motion, seeking to simply hold up the process, to delay, to, essentially frustrate an outcome that is not desired by certain sectors? To me, I'm not comfortable that some of those things aren't behind the bringing forward of this motion. I think that it would be very unfortunate indeed for us at this point in time to be supporting something like this. I think we have so much yet to come forward. There is so much technical information we're yet to receive. There is the elector poll. I'm not going to be putting myself in any sort of alternate position until I've had the benefit of all of those things that would come forward that would inform an appropriate decision in the future. And we will have those opportunities. So I would encourage councillors to oppose this motion and send the appropriate messages around the way that we go about our business. So I seek councillor support in opposing the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor James, your right of reply, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you very much for the contributions. Look, this is not going to go away. It's there. You can just imagine, or you can understand, in the last 3 councils, or ever since we made the decision on the 11th of December, that there have been people, residents, ratepayers, people who have come forward and expressed their concern about the location of the High Performance Centre on our, and I'll use the word again, pristine greenlands, open space that abuts this council building. So the petitioners have gained some momentum, and over time, you know, we'll have the elector poll, and whatever the results come out of that, okay. The petitioners, in my opinion, have made that have taken that step because they believe that once this goes out as far as possible to the community, that the people will look at this very carefully and say, will we lose our parklands here? Will it be built? Will there be a concrete in parts of it that is going to be used for a high performance centre for an elite group in the community and not for everybody who's in the sporting frame of mind? So look, it's not going to go away. And okay, if the motion falls down tonight, that's fine. I tried to put the motion forward as one of the motions that was carried at the meeting on the 15th of May. And Councillor Darko very kindly was going to second it, but of course she had some illness tonight, and so I didn't really know if I had a seconder. So when this motion came forward, I thought, well, look, it's close to what the motion was passed on the 15th of May. This won't go away. It's gaining more momentum as we go on. The elector poll will have to be followed through. This council has no option other than to have that sent out, and I believe it can be done not at the 200,000 but at a number which would be more realistic. So look, vote as we may, okay, I think this thing will obviously not be put on hold. We will have more people come forward and they will continue, in my opinion, to express their concern about losing this parklands, the Charles Hand Park and the Rosny parklands, to a group of people in the community, and that is denying a lot of our residents and people who admire and cherish that area of land. So in summary, all I can say is, okay, we put motion number 6 up, which was a decision of the meeting on the 15th of May.
Colleagues, I'll now put the amended motion. All those in favour, please raise their hand. Those against? Abstaining? Councillor Walker's abstaining. Thank you, that's lost. Moving now on to motion item 9.2, a motion I notice standing in the name of Councillor James. Sorry, Councillor Walker, my apologies. Councillor James Walker. Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. The elector poll will now proceed no matter what. And yes, there's a cost dimension, but I would note the cuteness of the council budget baking the revenue to fund this one-time cost permanently into the rating effort. It probably should have been done as a one-off levy, reflecting that this is a one-time cost, but hey. I think it would also be helpful to understand the position of the AFL and DSG on the High Performance Centre location, because at the 11th of December council meeting, a Tasmanian AFL team representative made a deputation extolling the benefits of the High Performance Centre, but did not express concern about the split campus model. In fact, Gary Swain, the Deputy Secretary of Transport and Infrastructure with DSG, also made a deputation. He said, "We will need to consider and evaluate what comes forward from council. It's obviously up to council what comes forward." He noted that Clarence, in terms of site appraisal scoring process, had 2 strong proposals, and that if he had to guess, I would say Rosny Park Primary, Charles Hand Park Secondary would be the best foot forward. He also said, at the end of the day, we understand that that's a matter for council, and you will have to judge your views about the other community needs and wants about the land we're discussing. So I guess we can all reflect on how we think this chamber performed on that front. On Saturday, I'll note that ABC Tasmanian Local Grandstand with That's Right, our old pal Chris Rowbottom, hosted a detailed interview with the another key AFL stakeholder, that being Kath McGann. He mentioned a letter that McGann had sent to members, noting it stated the current proposed site, Charles Hand Park, and the parklands split across the 2 sites isn't actually the preferred location of the club, and that Kingborough is a live option. McCann said, our preferred position is all on the former golf course site. Having the whole facility together is a preferred rather than having it split across the road. That is where we really work in council and state government to investigate, as I said, the feasibility of that. So also note that Rosny has been the preferred site and Kingborough was always a fantastic submission. So I guess I'm wondering why this wasn't stated on 11th of December when the sites were being considered, because I don't think we could have been more clear on that night, certainly about what DSG wanted. And again, there wasn't any pushback on the split site option. That option had come to us, not from us. And I'd say this makes for a complicated heads of agreement process. You know, and again, I would note that the mess is entirely of I would suggest, council's own making, and it could have been avoided if, rather than a 7 votes is all we need approach, had been taken, that effort had been put to find the highest level of agreement. Because I had circulated an alternative on the night that could have got more than 7 votes, co-located the facility and preserved the parklands in its entirety, and I was first on my feet at the meeting. The electric pole cost is an impost, but the division that will heat up during the process is probably a greater cost to be paid in terms of community fragmentation and disharmony, whichever way the result goes. And that's something that you can't fix with a rate rise or even a rate reduction. But I understand why people felt they had no other option than to move it forward. My motion doesn't stop Council, DSG and the AFL from continuing to talk to each other. My motion is about providing comfort that a heads of agreement cannot be concluded before the results of an elector poll are known. And this matters because an elector poll will be robustly contested, and at the moment levels of trust in council vary markedly in the community. The sad thing is a high performance centre should be a welcome addition to a municipality, and done right should delight and unite a community. The timeframes for consultation to occur were simply not realistic, and a strong and confident council would have pushed back and said as much to DSG and the AFL. What this motion, however, does is my way of trying to turn the temperature down about the contested elector poll which is going ahead and give the community some comfort in the process. It doesn't cost anything, and I urge you to all move ahead and give this the consideration it deserves. I seek your support so that we can try and get through this elector poll process in the best fashion possible.
Councillor James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's interesting that that the motion is moved should an elector poll on the AFL High Performance Centre be scheduled. It's a fait accompli. There is going to be an elector poll, and that is one of the push by 1,000 or 1,200 signatories, which was obviously tabled this evening, for an elector poll to be carried out across the city. And that is again one of the movements within this Save the Rosny Park group have been able to achieve as part of the process to have their message held and received by this council, even though this council has, in my opinion, made that comment that it's going to be on the 2 areas, Rosny Primary, Parklands, and then Charles Hand, the secondary oval. Although we did have a motion at the last meeting, and that was carried 7-5, I understand, where there was a recommendation that both ovals be on the parklands. So, you know, that was additional sort of recommendation that went forward. So, you know, we have this sort of situation where the council has passed a motion back on the 11th of December to have it primary on the parklands here, and then the secondary oval on Charles Hand, but then additional food for the pot to have both ovals on the Rosny Parklands here opposite the building. So look, whatever happens, it's going to be that we are still going to be caught up in this huge avalanche of people coming forward. And during the course of the elector poll, it's going to probably make our meetings longer because more people are going to get involved, because it's going to become an elector poll where people need and will obviously ask their neighbours, what do you think, what is the best process? So it's a great thing, in my opinion, to at least get people thinking. And whatever the result, I'm really confident that the poll will come back and it will be in the majority to save the parklands and Charles Hand Park. And then if the AFL and Department of State Growth decide to say, well, we need to listen to this, you know, this has been going on since December 2023 and it's now September 2024, you know, what are we going to do? I think we might have to pull the pin here. And even though the petitioners and the public meeting opinion was not the parklands, not Charles Hand Park, but somewhere else within Clarence, you know, they were going to compromise on that. You know, they always said that they wanted to have the AFL, the High Performance Centre somewhere in Clarence. So they're not sort of being no and negative to any proposal. So if it comes out in such a way that the poll does go in the affirmative, then I believe that people will win on this, and I think that the AFL and DSU will say, no, not on that land, we'll go elsewhere, and they probably will go to Kingborough.
Any other colleagues wishing to make a contribution? Councillor Mulder was, and then Councillor Chong.
At the risk of repeating myself, no I won't, I'll come up with some other points. Getting back to the idea that somehow or other this is an appropriate pause pending the electors' poll is just plain nonsense. The AFL, we are now going through a due diligence process, and the same will happen at Kingston. And as it was correctly reported, Kingston remains a viable option if the due diligence on the Clarence, on the Rosny Park doesn't make it. And that due diligence includes an environmental assessment that I hate to say and hate to point out includes the foraging habits of the swift parrot. So those are all the environmental considerations. There's the geography and the geology and the geophys and all the rest of that stuff all goes into the question of whether it can be built, and as a result of that, whether it should be built. And if we fail on any of those things, it will go to Kingston. Now, to bring this motion forward to suggest that we need to stop the heads of agreement being signed before an electors' poll, which must be held within 60 days of the tabling of the submission, that we must hold an elector, that we must not sign a heads of agreement, is just vacuous nonsense. Because, as anyone will tell you, the due diligence won't be even completed then. So it's a question of why are we stalling something that won't even have occurred? So all right, so you make your point and you sound like you're a hero to the people. Now we come to the electors' poll. I, for one, have made a commitment, as members of the gallery will tell you, that if 70% of the electors come back and say they don't want it in Rosny Park, I will be the first to support a motion that we send it to Kingston. In fact, I drafted a motion and I circulated, although I didn't lodge it, to suggest that's exactly what we do, because that motion is the only motion which is an alternative to the ones we have already passed. And if you fancifully think, right, so I've made that commitment, I'll listen to the people. And there are people around here who think that they are going to romp it in. Well, not according to my inbox, but that's fine. I'm also, mindful of the way this debate has been conducted, and I find that being yelled at, told, "Are you listening?" to be highly offensive, because yes, I am. I'm listening to both sides of the argument. I am listening to the points that people make, and in the end I was elected to make a judgment between those things. I am listening. That doesn't mean I'm agreeing. So that's the way I take it to these things. Now, for the sake of scoring full marks and a free beer, I will put my life on the line now and say that there is less chance of an alternative site for a high-performance centre in Clarence than there is for Harold Holt walking up Cheviot Beach tomorrow morning.
Any other colleagues? Oh, sorry, Councillor Chong.
You had to be there, Mr. Mayor.
I was distracted by that.
Absolutely. Vanishing premiers. And I guess, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm slightly echoing something that Councillor Mulder says. And in his explanatory notes, Councillor Walker talks about a robust campaign. And I want to say up front, some of the emails and the communication that I have received so far has been insulting, intimidatory, and I don't think that's appropriate. I don't care which side you're on. That is not an appropriate way to behave. And I sincerely hope, as we go into this electoral poll process, that people think about how they're behaving and how they're putting things across. Everybody can have a passionate view, but you don't need to try and intimidate people to have that same view.
There, Councillor Chong. Councillor
And just to prove that I do watch the agenda briefings if I am not there, yes, Harold Holt, up for a free beer myself. Thank you, Councillor Walker. And can I just reiterate Councillor Chong's comments there, because some of the correspondence that we are receiving is just not on. It really has not. I have not experienced anything like this. Yes, we are listening, and as Councillor Mulder has said, but we're listening to everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Councillor Hume.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think Councillor Mulder is right. This motion may end up, regardless of which way it goes, end up being superfluous because it reflects what's likely to happen anyway, that the heads of agreement is unlikely to be signed until after the electoral poll's concluded. Having said that, I still won't be supporting the motion simply on a matter of principle. When I voted to support Council's decision on 11th of December last year, I did so not based on popular opinion, but what I thought would be the best outcomes overall for our city and its residents, taking into account all the information I had at hand. And I say that not conceding that my opinion isn't the popular one. I simply don't know. I don't know what the result of the electoral poll is going to be, but I certainly don't share Councillor James's confidence or the confidence of Save Rosny Parks that it will be the result they necessarily want. I think we simply don't know. But I am certain, based on all the information and advice I've received and considered, that the benefits of having the high performance centre in our city will be far-reaching, and that there are no viable alternative sites within Clarence. The high performance centre will be an intergenerational asset, and the future generations that stand to benefit from it won't get a vote in this poll. And my focus is on doing what's right, not on what's popular. And by that I mean right for not just the current residents of Clarence, but for those future generations. I will not be changing my decision on the basis of an outcome of an electoral poll. And I strongly suspect, and I'd be interested to hear if anyone wants to put their hand on their heart and say they will, well, I guess with the exception of Councillor Mulder, who's provided a threshold of 70%. You know, that anyone else around this table is likely to either. As far as I'm concerned, the electoral poll is an exorbitant and unnecessary expense that has been foisted on all ratepayers, and one that will not change any outcomes. So I see no reason to delay the negotiation or the signing of the heads of agreement. Thank you.
Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be supporting this motion tonight, simply because I can't see any harm. It's going to happen anyway, whether this passes or not. And I think, as Councillor Walker has noted, it just gives the community some comfort in knowing that that's the case. Now, there's been some great comments tonight, and to reiterate what Councillor Hume said of why he was elected, why he made that decision, it wasn't about votes. And interestingly, I was exactly the same. But what I love is that we come at it from very different perspectives and life experience and knowledge in our areas of work. And that's what I love about this council, is we do all bring those very different perspectives, and we're all here, we're committed, we want to make good decisions, which is fantastic. And I think that's why this is such a really fascinating matter for us at the moment. I want to talk about the electoral poll just briefly because I can, and I think it is really unfortunate that we ratepayers have to pay for that, but unfortunately that is the cost of doing democracy. So we can't change that, and if the community rally to get to that point where we have to spend that amount of money, well, that's what we do. That's what local government does. And I look forward to seeing the results. Really fascinating to hear that you've made that threshold. And I was, oh, wow, that's a really interesting idea. Maybe that would help me make a decision. I don't know. But yeah, interesting times ahead, but I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hunter. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I thank Councillor Walker for bringing forward this motion, and I, to some extent, understand where it's coming from. However, if you look at what's happening with the elector poll in Glenorchy, the timeframes that they've set around that are actually quite prompt. And I, much like Councillor Hume, actually, and I think Councillor Mulder also, actually don't think that the time frame for undertaking this particular activity would actually have any strong likelihood of interfering with our capacity to consider heads of agreement, as effectively I don't think one's going to happen before the other. I think that we're a bit further away than that. We still haven't seen all the reporting come back from DSG and a whole range of other material that's yet to materialise. So I'm very comfortable that I don't see that we'll be doing one before the other. So I don't think it's necessary in that respect. There's also, the argument that you might consider that this is another one of these levers seeking to interject stalling. I'm not sure that that's the case, but in any event, the motion is otherwise quite tidy. I think to touch on what I would say though is I have listened this evening to what colleagues have been saying about the feedback that they've been getting from in relation to this matter, and I would just encourage all of those people wanting to make contributions to councillors to think a bit carefully about how you might like to receive those things yourself, if it were you or someone you love working in these roles, to be told that you're not doing your job properly, that you're a stooge for the AFL, that you're, or for other councillors, or that you're not listening, or that you are misinformed, and a whole range of other, and for me personally, all of that sort of quite offensive material has come from one side of the debate predominantly. I would encourage those people to reconsider how they engage, because it's actually not helping the cause that you purport in any way, shape or form. I actually really have a strong dislike for people saying, I support democracy but only as long as you agree with me. Right? I actually find that quite offensive. So please, think about it, because we are real people. We all have feelings. We actually read all of the things that you send us. I'm sure that I can speak for my colleagues to say they all diligently go about their roles, regardless of whether I agree with them or not. So, and I respect the views. I love them, I welcome them, but just please try and think about the people on the other end receiving them from a personal perspective. And I, like all of my colleagues, will look forward to what comes out of the elector poll when it happens. I'm sure it will, and then make decisions accordingly at that point. And I'll be opposing the motion this evening.
Councillor Walker, right of reply.
Thanks everybody for their contributions, and I note a lot of them included why they believe that they're here on council. My mantra largely is politics is problem solving, and I'm really trying to find a solution to turn the dial down on what could be quite a heated contest. I think if you look at my motion, the word finalisation is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and people should reflect on that. But ultimately, as this is before you, you can distill it down to a binary choice. Either you're totally fine with a heads of agreement being finalised before the poll results are reported, or you're not. And I think that that's the simplest way to look at this vote that is now immediately before you.
All right, thank you, colleagues. I'll put the motion, saying in the name of Councillor Walker. All those in favour? So those against? And that's lost. Interesting, colleagues. Moving now on to item 10, councillors' questions time. There's no questions on notice. 10.3, answers to questions without notice, previous council meeting as listed in the agenda. Questions without notice. Are there any questions from the floor this evening? Starting with the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ritchie. Thank you. Councillor Mulder. Thank you. Councillor Hunter. Councillor Hume.
Yes, thank you. Both my questions relate to the AFLW High Performance Centre in Roscoe. I believe there's a lot of misinformation circulating in relation to the project, and one example is the suggestion that other sites are available in Clarence, such as Gilston Bay, Clarence Plains, Cambridge, Blunston Arena and near the airport. Could you please explain, Mayor, what the limitations and constraints are on other suggested sites? And is there anywhere else Council could have lodged a successful expression of interest for that would have been favoured over the Kingston Twin Overs?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hume. I might ask the CEO to answer that one, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Hume. Throughout the preparation of our proposal, officers looked at several locations across the city, including Gilston Bay, Cambridge, Blunston Arena, 7 Mile Beach, Clarence Plains, specifically in relation to Bayview College, and obviously Rosny. Each of the above-mentioned sites had limitations, and in some cases council didn't own the land, which was obviously a significant limitation. In other cases, it was not possible to co-share the site with an existing occupant, or there was insufficient land available to co-share. And in the case of Blunston Arena, it was our assessment that there wasn't a clear option for a second oval, and that there is an existing tenant at the site. Our aim was to identify a site that was the best fit for the least disruption to existing users and user groups. The Rosny Parklands and Charlesham Park sites best met those parameters set by the Department of State Growth, and also minimised displacement of other users. So that, in a nutshell, is why we landed where we did.
Do you have a second question, Councillor Hume?
Thank you, Mayor. I thank the CEO for his answer. Another piece of misinformation that's been circulating in relation to the proposal is the suggestion that due to Council's expression of interest to have the High Performance Centre built in Rosny, the roughly $400,000 spent on the City Heart Plan has been wasted. Can you confirm if, as is claimed, Council has abandoned the City Heart Plan and wasted $400,000 in ratepayers' money?
Thank you for the question. Again, I'll call on the CEO to answer that one.
Thank you, Mayor, and again, thank you for the question. As I've mentioned earlier tonight in another response, Council has not abandoned the City Heart Plan. As we have stated several times, Council officers are working with consultants to finalise the draft City Heart Plan to bring this back to Council for approval to go out for final community consultation before ultimately final approval of the plan by council. The suggestion that council has wasted $400,000 developing our City Heart plan is wrong. The premise relies upon an incorrect assumption that the City Heart plan only deals with the old Rosny Golf Course and the Charles Hand Park. The City Heart plan stretches from Warrane to Belrive, addressing a range of community, housing and recreational issues. It is not limited to the old golf course and Charles Hand Park. The $405,000 spent over 3 years has developed several strategies and supporting documentation to help deliver the City Heart plan. The delay in finalising the plan simply relates to the fact that we are now working to include the High Performance Centre in the relevant sections of the plan, capitalising on the opportunity to build connections between an extended arts and cultural precinct around Rosny Farm and the High Performance Centre. All other elements of the plan outside of the High Performance Centre are expected to be implemented as described in the plan once approved by Council. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and thank you, Councillor Hume. Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. And I won't ask a Dorothy Dix question. I will ask my question, and it's to do with the amount of debris and rubbish that's on the centre section of the Tasman Highway between the Cambridge turnoff and the Cambridge Park Centre. I know it's a Department of State Growth or their contractor, but is it possible, Mr Mayor, for us to at least write to the relevant contractor under the guise of the Department of State Growth and tidy it up? It's an absolute disgrace, being our sort of gateway to the city and also to the airport. And last night on my travels to 7 Mile Beach, I noticed that. Is it possible?
The short answer is yes. I think that the Tasman Highway should always provide a wow factor for people coming in and out of our capital city, so absolutely.
Second, I won't ask the question about the electric motor vehicle charging at this stage, but at the next meeting. But my second question is in relation to the Cambridge Master Plan and the Cambridge Oval, and also what the situation is with the development and Council's role with the Department of Education in that project.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr Graham?
Through you, Mr Mayor, we're planning to come to the 17th, 15th of July, 15th of July workshop to talk with Council on those master plans.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I do indeed have 2 questions without notice. My first question is in relation to the intersection of Rywena Road and Rosny Hill Road. Is this being looked at as part of the diligence and work being done around the High Performance Centre infrastructure?
Thank you. Mr Graham?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I don't know the exact details. CEO might be able to answer, but I reckon it would become part of a DA if it ever got to that sort of phase.
I wanted to give you a go try, Mr Graham. So,
thank you. The expectation is that it will be, but at this point in time, in the absence of a concept plan and the other sort of preliminary work, it's a little bit too soon. But the expectation is that ultimately it's very likely we will.
Because this question could potentially have commercial in confidence dimensions, I'm going to try and ask it, if you like, in an Ian Turby-Terps new prices right fashion. Council's current legal expenditure to date on Kangaroo Bay, would you say it is higher or lower than what is projected to be expended on the elector poll?
CEO?
I'll need to take that on notice.
Okay.
and probably deal with it confidentially.
Since we know what the elector poll is costing.
Councillor Coyne?
If I may refer to my question at the last council meeting in regards to horses and parks and wildlife areas, this begged the question from the last answer. For information, council does not permit the exercising of horses on any council-managed beach. Is that factually correct?
CEO, Mr Brennan? Mr Brennan, thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor. I believe it is, yes. It's part of our bylaw
in public places that animals are not permitted unless it's in a designated area.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
So the policy for that can be found. Can I possibly be directed to where that policy...
Provided with a copy tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. And if possible, how and when that was decided and how it's policed.
Mr. Brennan, do you want to answer? You'll provide a copy of the policy tomorrow, but as to the policing...
It's part of our public places bylaw, and I believe that's due for revisiting in 2027, 2026, something like that, that need to be done every periodically.
Thank you, Councillor Goyen. Councillor Chong? Councillor Kennedy?
Yes, Mayor. Just one question that came to me recently with regards to the petition, and I had a call from a resident just off Clarence Street who was walking with a friend, both in their late 60s, quite young, and basically were chased down, felt threatened, intimidated to take information and basically forced to say that yes, they would sign a petition. And they said, we feel really uncomfortable about this, we're just out having a walk. And the answer was, we'll complain to the council. And that was me. I'm not quite sure what my question is, but can someone provide me with the answer that I'm supposed to give the people that ask me the question?
Yeah, the short answer is that sort of behaviour clearly is unacceptable, no matter which way you cut it.
That's what I said, but it didn't work.
Well, the good thing is that these two individuals have an opportunity, along with every other resident, to have a vote and elect a poll very soon, so they can let their true feelings be known in a democratic way.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kennedy. Now moving on to item number 11, a closed meeting. I'll call for a motion to move into a closed meeting. Move Councillor Chong, seconded Councillor Goyne. Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. So thank you for those members of the public who have attended in person this evening. It's been a marathon sitting, and I thank you all very much for your attendance tonight. And those joining us via the live stream at home, please end the live stream. And members of the public, thank you all very much. Same time, same place, 3 weeks' time.
Same channel.
Same channel.
That channel. Yeah.
And in the end, we just took it because it's just like, it was just getting nasty.
Yeah.
So.
Are we free, Andrew?